AI and future tech jobs are all the rage in 2025, but most people, they struggle to break in. And it's not because people aren't smart enough. It's not because they're not going to school. It is because they don't have a process that is optimized for getting the job. You see a lot of people, they spend time taking courses, they get multiple degrees, they spend years, they get hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, not knowing this exact process. And so what I'm going to do is break down the last 13 years of my learnings being in the robotics, AI, and automation industry and helping thousands of professionals get their start in this comprehensive video. Now, I don't know how long this video is going to be. You probably know more than I do. It's going to be a long one. It's going to be an in-depth look at the exact process that you can replicate to get your first foot in the door or get your next role working in future tech, so robotics, AI, automation, or other high-tech roles working as a professional on the latest and greatest innovations in the space. So we're going to hop over to my whiteboard. This is the only video you need to get a $100,000 plus career working in future tech. And when I say future tech, I'm kind of bundling in these like hot commodity fields. So artificial intelligence or AI, robotics, and then also automation. Now there are other innovative technologies like flying cars or humanoids or that kind of thing. But we're just going to use the terminology future tech in this video just to kind of give you an idea. So if you are a professional and you're either new to technology or you're an engineer and you're trying to figure out how can I level up my game, this is the exact roadmap. I'm going to be sharing everything that I've learned over the last 13 years in the industry. And we're just going to go step by step through this. This is going to be case study style, process style. So grab yourself a cup of coffee, grab yourself a notepad. This is going to be super useful for you as you advance your career to the next level. And the resources that I talk about in this video are also below this video. You can check out the timestamps if you want to jump around to certain parts. And also subscribe to the channel so that you get notified of more valuable videos just like this one. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is self-reflection. So on here, I put self-reflection because we need a starting point. You know, most classes and most courses, they go through this linear process, and I didn't really recognize this until I spent some time thinking about it. And so if you've never seen this before, once you see it, you can't unsee it. And basically, school follows this like very linear process where what you're doing is you're getting told you need to learn a skill, and then you need to, take a certain course, and then eventually you get yourself, a degree, whether that's a high school diploma or you go to college or university, and then you get a job. The problem with thinking things linearly like this is, first of all, you have no control over what skills you're accumulating, and you don't actually know if you're optimizing for the job that you want. So, for example, if you want to get a career in future tech, or let's say artificial intelligence or AI, how do you know that the skills that you're learning back here in the process are the actual skills that companies want to pay people for? How do you know that? And there's a lot of inherent trust that whoever is teaching you is actually teaching you things that are relevant to your goals versus teaching you things that are built on somebody else's opinions. Now, regardless of what you think about education, I am formally trained. I did go to engineering school, so I've gone through this myself. But honestly, if I had thought about it in this way first, I may have reconsidered my, educational journey, and I may have thought of things a little bit differently. But I just wanted to point this out. You just don't know if what you're learning is going to be relevant to what your job will be or what your role will be until you do this activity. So that is the first thing that I want you to consider, is kind of this linear process. And if you think back to all the classes you've taken, you had really no say over the curriculum because somebody else told you you need to sit through linear algebra to check it off your math requirements for your engineering degree. And it's like, well, where did that come from? And so I would caution you to question kind of what you're spending your time on, because a lot of times it is just checking a box for some sort of credential or certification or degree. And if you want the degree, that's one thing. But if you want to make sure that you're spending your time doing things that are quote unquote high leverage, the best way to do that is to make sure you are studying the things that are relevant to the roles that you want. So you want to study what's relevant to the role you want. Okay. And so when you do that, you ensure a couple things. One, you're not wasting time aimlessly on random things. And two, the time that you put in is valued at the output, right? So you get kind of this 1-for-1 match versus you're picking up these random skills and hoping that somebody at some point in time will pay you for them. You already know that the job that you want will pay you for that skill. So that's learning number one, is you need to do some self-reflection on this. You need to figure out, okay, what am I studying? And you want to make sure that it's high leverage, making sure that you're studying what's relevant for you. And you also want to reuse skills you have. And I don't know why engineers do this, but I work with a lot of engineers, and they think that all the stuff that they've learned in the past is like throwaway. It's like, oh, I already did that. It's like, well, why wouldn't you want to build upon what you've already done and go in that direction and use the skills that you have versus completely scrapping everything you've done? So I'll give you a quick example. So in mentorship, I was working with a client, and he had a mechanical engineering background, and his goal was to get into robotics. Rather than walking through the logical path of using your mechanical background to get a mechanical engineering job at a robotics company, he told me, no, I don't want to do mechanical engineering. I want to be a software engineer in robotics. And it might sound like trivial, and like watching this back, you're like, who would do that? That doesn't make any sense at all. This person has a mechanical background, so obviously they should go get a mechanical job at a robotics company to get their start in robotics, right? You would think that would make the most logical sense. But for whatever reason, engineers are not logical when it comes to the strategy side of their career advancement. And so they think the most logical step is to do the exact opposite of their skill set and go through the software engineering door to get into robotics. And what I will say is this is a lot harder than doing this. The obvious choice is usually going to be easier. So if you can leverage your background to get to the next step in your career, that's going to be much more easier than you scrapping all of your mechanical background to then go pick up software engineering. You're basically starting at zero, and you're going to be competing with other software engineers who started in software engineering and have that, 4 years of studying, experience, and just practice ahead of you. And so it's a lot harder to compete in that arena. And so my biggest recommendation as you're going through the self-reflection is you need to figure out what your strengths are and what skills you already have so that you can play to your advantage. And you need to define this before you move into the next step, because if you don't know your background, or you don't know where you fit, and you don't even know really what your goals are, then it's going to be really hard to figure out where you fit into the grand scheme of this whole career move strategy and how you can get to, that $100,000 a year mark or more as fast as possible. Okay. And so I always say to people, use your skills to your strengths. And obviously, if you can get your skills that you already have, plus the things that you like to do, that's a pretty good starting point. That's usually what I tell people. All right, so once you've done kind of that self-reflection, there's an activity that I have on my channel here, and I'll leave a link around this. And if you're in the bootcamp, you can find this in the career resources, called the action plan. And the action plan is a technique that we use to help you define where you currently are and outline all the skills that you've acquired in your career so far and where you want to go. So your goals. So it allows you to see that all in one spot. So I'd encourage you to check out that action plan and create yours if you need a little bit more clarity on how to do this self-reflection without it getting woo-woo. The whole point of this is to define current state and define future state, which is exactly what engineers do in the field. I know when I was working at Raytheon in our leadership program, we did a lot of current state, future state mappings when I was there, and we were constantly analyzing what's current state, what's future state, how do we bridge the gap? That's exactly what this action plan will do for you. And so I'd encourage you to define that before moving into the next step. All right, so we've covered self-reflection. We'll go ahead and we'll check that off. Now I want to talk about market rules and research. So market rules and research and talking about the industry. I have some trainings on my channel here about market-based wages. I really think this is an important concept to understand because I didn't understand this at all in engineering school or even before going to engineering school. Nobody talks about this anywhere. Nobody talks about the money math behind any of this unless you're in a business school or a finance program or you just know somebody that knows the rules or the games that people play in their career. You're just not going to know this. So market rules. There's this concept, and I don't know who coined it. I call it market-based wages. So market-based wages. And I always go back to this concept when I'm doing hiring for our team, when I'm looking at job offers that our clients get, when I'm trying to negotiate, moves and incentive packages. Like there's a lot of like relocation and bonuses and equity and all kinds of things that you can get when you're trying to negotiate a job offer. And I always go back to market-based wages because it removes the ambiguity around how much money should I make and how much should I get paid versus I just want to make, 150K. Like a lot of engineers will come into our programs and they tell me they want to make double what they're currently making. So if they're making 75K, they tell me they want to make 150. And it's like, well, why? Why do you think that you need 2 times what you're currently making? Other than the personal gratification of making double what you're currently making. And nobody usually has a good reason. They just say, oh, well, that just sounds good. Of course it sounds good. Here is the actual way to think about wages and the market. And I'll tie this into why this is important in a minute and why you need to do this at the beginning. Because if you have a goal of making a certain dollar amount as an engineer, you need to know the limitations of the game or the market that you're playing within, because there's only so much money that can be spent in certain areas, right? And so I think a tangible example would be like if you want to buy a BMW, like a brand new BMW, you're probably not going to spend $500,000 on the BMW. You'd be looking at a supercar, right? Because the market wouldn't allow you to spend $500,000 on a BMW that should be $50,000. And that's the same kind of principle that I like to explain to people in terms of market-based wages. And so what I always tell people is you need to figure out your expenses, going back to the action plan and your goals, like what you want. Figure out your expenses, figure out where you're living, and figure out the lifestyle that you want. Because if you don't know these things, it's going to be really, really tough to assess job opportunities without criteria. So you need to figure out your expenses. I like to look at it monthly or annually. Monthly's easy though, because like there are recurring expenses that professionals have. You're either going to have a mortgage or your rent, or you're also going to have, car payments, food. You're going to have your basic cost of living. And so what you need to do is really look at what you're spending your money on before you go through this activity, because just dropping a number like I want to make 200K a year or I want to make 150 a year, like that doesn't make any sense without any context, right? And so you need to figure out what this number is. Ideally per month, or you can just multiply this by 12 and then you can get it, per year. And that's going to be kind of your range, right, of what you need. And that's going to help you make decisions as to where you should go within the market, right? Going back to what I was saying, market-based wages, the market can only support, the amount of money that makes sense for the role, the responsibilities, and the location that you're working in. So there's kind of those three factors: the role, the responsibilities, and the location is like the environment. Where are you? And so we'll go through each of these quickly. So the role is basically like, what are you doing? So like, what were you hired for? And this can be like a combination of the level you're hired at. So obviously somebody in the C-suite is going to make more than somebody that's a junior engineer. And so you need to know kind of where you're at kind of in that org chart. The responsibility is what specifically do you do on a day-to-day that helps the company achieve their goals. So what are the kind of tasks, the outcomes, the skills that you bring to the table that allow you to do your work? So what do you bring that's valuable? So for a robotics engineer, that could be the fact that you're really good at C++ programming. You've got a strong software background. So you're bringing those valuable skills to the table, and that's what you're responsible for. You're responsible for writing the software that controls the camera on a robot arm that is doing some analysis of the environment or whatever. So what are you responsible for? And then the environment is a combination of the company type and your location. So city, basically. So basically the company type is like, are you working at a really small company that does like less than $10 million a year? Or do you work for a Fortune 50 company and they do billions of dollars a year and they have hundreds of thousands of employees? That's going to be, they're going to pay totally different. Their comp structure is going to be totally different. Are they a startup, or are they like, meaning they just raised rounds of funding, like Series A, Series B, Series C, or are they a publicly traded company and they've been around for hundreds of years? That's kind of like what I mean by company type. And then location is basically going to be your gauge for cost of living. So a company that is let's say a Fortune 50 company and they have a location in Georgia, that's going to pay probably less than a company, that same exact company, that's a Fortune 50 company, and you're working out of their New York City office. So you're going to make more in that New York City office job. And so once you can kind of see how these things piece together, it's going to click for you, and you're going to be like, wait a minute, why did nobody explain this to me? And you're going to thank me, because this is going to help you make some really cool decisions around designing the career that you want working in future tech, but also optimizing for how much money you want to make, the lifestyle you want to live, and the work that you get to do. All right. And so that's why this is really important to know kind of where your baseline and where you want to live. So if you're the kind of person that wants to live in Manhattan and you want to be in the hustle bustle, then the cost of living there is going to be higher. You're probably going to get paid higher. The opportunity to work for a startup, also higher. If you want to live, in, farmland in Iowa, that's going to be totally different than, the hustle and bustle, the amount of money that the geographic location is going to be able to pay you is probably going to be significantly less, but you might have acres and acres of land and you can kind of build out your homestead, so that's why it's really important to figure out kind of what you want, figure out your expenses, stack that with the skills that you already have, and you can start to see how, if you piece all this together, you're going to speed up your search, because you're going to have criteria that you can measure against to figure out, okay, am I going in the right direction? And do I have the skills that I need to prove that I am the right fit? And so we do a lot of this in the boot camp over the 12 weeks with our schedule, where we're constantly looking at, okay, Am I doing the thing that makes sense? Do I have the ability to show and articulate that I know what I'm doing? And can I relate that back to my end goal? So market-based wages, there are a few resources on market-based wages that go in detail with this concept. So if you need to check those out, the link to those videos are below this video in the description. I'll probably put a card or something on the video so you can go find it. But basically you want to know, like, you want to optimize for the role, the responsibility, and the environment. The relationship is basically if you are in a high-level role that's generally strategic in nature, not tactical, and you live in a city over a suburb, and you are at a large company or a startup that raised, my opinion, Series B plus. Series A is probably okay depending on how much money they raised. So, or a startup that is, let's just say, Series A or beyond. I generally like to see enough runway for the team at that company for a few years if they're pre-sales. So we can talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but basically you want to be at a large company or a startup that basically they have money and you are doing, you know, high value tasks, meaning like anything that gets you closer to the customer will generally make you more money. So the closer you are to the customer, the more money you make. The more tactical you are, the closer you are to the product, the less money you'll make, which is not what engineers want to hear. Engineers don't want to hear that, but it's the truth. I've found that the closer you are to the customer, the more money you make. So this is why salespeople, even though they know nothing about how the product was made, generally make more than engineers because they're closer to the customer. The customer is the one with the money. So the closer you are to the money, the more money you make. The closer you are to the product, the less money you make. Meaning, if you're the person that is assembling the widgets, meaning you're an assembler in a factory, you're going to make less money than the sales rep who's going out to the customer and selling the same widget. Hopefully that makes sense. So if you can take these kind of principles together and you want to maximize your income, then my answer is go as strategic as possible, get leadership roles. So that could be engineering leadership, that could be even transitioning over to the business side or the product side or the quality side or the customer side of one of these companies. It could potentially even be GM, like factory ride, running an actual location or a plant, working in a city over the suburbs. So like a Boston opportunity might be better than working in middle of nowhere Rhode Island or middle of nowhere Vermont, for example. And then working obviously at a large company or at a startup that has money. If you want to figure out if they have money, you can look for press releases. Most startups, they will brag about how they just closed on a series whatever, or they close X amount of dollars and they'll do a press release. You can check their website. Sometimes it'll even say in the job description. Or you can use a site called Crunchbase. So we'll actually go and take a look at a quick one here that I was just looking at earlier. So let's switch over to the computer. So this company right here is called Vium. And what they do is they're an AI company, but they're trying to bridge the gap between artificial intelligence and actual like physical space, so robotics. And so if you're interested in them, they just closed on a Series C funding for $30 million. And the founder was formerly at MongoDB. And so very interesting platform here, but you can basically get press releases. The other way to do it is to go to Crunchbase. And what I'll typically do, and like we probably can just do this for Crunchbase, is you just search the name of the company, and then you search Crunchbase, and then it'll come up. So then you can find their Crunchbase profile, and you can kind of get a feel for right here. So growth insights, financials is usually where I look. Sometimes they'll gray it out, sometimes they won't, but you can see right in here, raises 30 million, Series C. And I generally like to look to see how many people they have there to make sure that there's enough quote unquote money to cover overhead and then R&D. This is a Series C, so they have more money than just this one round of funding. And I would imagine they're actually selling right now, so they have some partnerships here. I don't know if they're paid partnerships or not, but you can see here that they've got partners. So as long as they're selling and they have money, then you should be good to go. I made the mistake early in my career working for a startup that didn't raise a lot of money, and they were also pre-sales, and I took a role with them and I was let go of because I didn't map out, runway and understanding that, companies need money. There's two ways to get money, right? They need to have investors, or they need to be selling. And if they don't have enough money from investors, meaning let's say they raise a $5 million round, maybe it's like a seed funding round, and they raised that money like 2 years ago, and they have 50 people on the team, that $5 million is gone, and they're not going to have enough runway, especially if they're not selling anything right now. Who's paying for everybody's payroll? And so that's just kind of a quick napkin math due diligence, is just making sure if you do get a startup offer that you're choosing startups that have enough cash and wiggle room to either get them to actually the sales process, to get them to where they're actually selling what they've created, or there's enough sales partnerships or proof of sales that they can make enough revenue to cover expenses. So that's just a little aside on startups. Generally speaking, though, if you're looking at companies that have raised, Series A through C, as long as it's not like $1 million here or there, it's like tens of millions, you should be okay, presuming they don't have, 2,000 employees, right? So just something to consider there as far as kind of doing some market research and doing market rules. So now that we've done that, I want to go back to my list here and just make sure we've got everything. So choosing the industry, finding roles. So let's spend a few minutes here and we'll talk about, okay, cool, we just figured out our criteria. We understand market-based wages. The more strategic you are, the more money you make. The more tactical you are, the less money you make. If you live in a city, you're going to make more money than living in the suburbs. If you are depending on the company and the company type and what they need, generally software makes more than hardware, but it just depends on where you're at. I know some hardware engineers that do pretty well. Again, a lot of it just depends what company you're at and what's needed in the market. And then large company versus, Joe's engineering firm. If you work for Joe's engineering firm and it's Joe and his wife and his daughter, that's going to be a totally different salary than working for, let's say, Raytheon. Okay, they're going to the amount of money they're able to pay you is going to be totally different. So, cool. So now we need to talk about, okay, cool, how do we find these roles? Now that we have some definition around what specific skills that we have, we know our location, our lifestyle, the type of company we want to work at, and I would encourage you to do your action plan sooner rather than later. A lot of people try to leave the career stuff to the end. Again, going back to that linear way of thinking that has been ingrained in us since kindergarten, where you just show up somewhere and somebody tells you this is what you need to learn. At some point in your career, if you want to make significant leaps and bounds and get to the next level quickly, you have to start playing the game yourself. And you have to start figuring out, is the advice I'm getting the advice that I actually want? You know, because you could have a manager push a bunch of certs and tell you to go take a bunch of training. They're telling you to do that because they have their own requirements and needs and responsibilities for their role as a leader at that company that may not actually get you to where you want to go. So at some point you need to kind of think about, okay, what game am I playing and what do I want? And where do I want to live and the lifestyle that I want to work in? I want to briefly talk about like remote versus in person. I know a lot of companies are moving back to in person. Couple of just general thoughts about this. If you want to work in manufacturing, it is very difficult to work remotely. Just going to throw that out there. So manufacturing, if you want to work in manufacturing, you are probably going to be in person. Remote is probably off the table. I've never once had, unless you are in sales, like and you're selling something, maybe you can get away with remote, like account management or anything client related, you might be able to. But if you want to work in a factory and you want to do industrial automation, you want to do factory 4.0, anything with the word factory in it tells you that you're probably going to need to be a person. Unless you are a senior, leader, director, and you're doing planning and strategy calls and you're not actually on the ground floor implementing. If you're an implementer and you want to be on the factory, you want to be setting up robots, you want to be setting up conveyors, you want to be working with PLCs, you're going to need to be in person. And if you don't like that, then you may want to reconsider a manufacturing role for something else. Or you may want to look at leadership type roles because they give you a little bit more flex. But I've been pressed to find an actual manufacturing job where you get to just kind of hang at home while the equipment is running. They usually want you on site, and the lifestyle of this is usually shifts. I used to work 4/10s, which was actually, in real life, it was more like 4/12s, because our lines would run for 10 hours, and they'd want us to be there like an hour before and an hour after to make sure that everything was still ready for the next shift. So I would just take that into consideration. I have a lot of people that come into the program, they want to get into manufacturing, they want to get into industrial automation, and then they tell me they want to work remotely, and the first thing I tell them is good luck finding that, because they're going to want you on site. If you're working on industrial equipment, they're going to want you on site. Very rarely do they let you work remotely and do like travel or being a digital nomad. If you want to be in manufacturing, you're not going to be able to be a digital nomad. Now, if you want a role in robotics that might be okay for being a digital nomad, I don't know how many of you in my audience are even aware of digital nomads. If you are, leave a comment below this video saying that you're a digital nomad and you're looking for remote opportunities. I would say anything software based is probably okay. Or soft skills. So if you want to work at a robotics company and you want to be non-technical, this is actually where I tell people that have business backgrounds, if you want to break into future tech and you've got a business background or you've got a sales background or you just want to be more non-technical at a technical company, these types of roles, so marketing, sales, finance. Again, I've had people come into our boot camp and they're accountants. I'm like, dude, the fastest way for you to go from accounting into robotics is for you to be an accountant at a robotics company, or for you to work in finance at a robotics company, for you to do data at a robotics company, or business analytics at a robotics company. Fill in the blank with what you're looking for. That is the critical path. Like, you could get that job tomorrow if you just polished up your resume and your LinkedIn, which we're gonna get to. As we continue this video, I'm gonna show you exactly what you need to do, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, that's the critical path, is again going back to leveraging your skills and applying it to the market and what the market wants. So those would be a couple ideas for digital nomads. Let's go ahead and shift gears. I want to show you my process here for finding these types of roles, and I'm just going to do a couple of like case studies of things that people always ask me. So let's take a look at this. So what I'll do is I'll go to Google, and this is called the query method. And there are some videos on my channel about the query method. You can find my Instagram below this, and you can find more videos on the ways to find robotics jobs. The too long didn't read, but basically what I like to do is I'll do a query search with a job board. So it'll be site dot the job board name, jobs lever.co, and so this would be the job board, and then I do a search term. So we'll just search robotics, and so now it's just going to bring up all of the companies that use the lever job board, and they mention something like robotics. So you can see robotics software engineer, Cobalt Robotics, robotics test engineer, reliable robotics. So that's basically one way to do it. If you're looking to get into AI is kind of short for a keyword, but let's see what comes up. So AI engineer for the AI fund, head of AI, that could be interesting. And then you can kind of see, this is kind of how you would reverse engineer finding these roles. And so what I would do is take my plan of all of the skills that I already have. I would do that action plan, skills that I already have, the locations that I want to work in, the types of jobs that I'm interested in, and then I'd just be searching a bunch of keywords. So if I had Python skills, I would be searching, okay, Python, let's be a little more specific. Python and robotics. Okay, cool. So here's one right here, senior software engineer, C++, Python. So then what I would do is I'd grab a template like this in Google Docs, and you'll find this template inside of the program. And what you can do is you can add in the date, you can put the status, like if you're applied or not, it's in progress, your resume link, the company name, and then the link to the job posting. So I'd grab this, and then I would just put it over here. Link to the job. And then fill this form out. This is going to give you kind of a tracker or a dashboard with all of the roles that you found that met your criteria. And this will serve kind of as your reference point, your frame of reference. And so the interesting thing about what we're doing here is essentially, instead of going linear where you go skill, course, cert, degree, job, my process is basically job. It's a little bit of like current state analysis. So we do some current state stuff first. So current state, current state and goals. Then we do job search. Then we do analysis. And then basically once we've done our analysis, we jump right into TDP, which will continue going forward. But this is basically where we're at right now in the process, is how do we actually get a full list of what's currently available in the market and roughly what does that pay? And so going back to this role with Simbi, basically what we need to do is we need to figure out, okay, does this match what we're trying to actually accomplish? So the senior software engineer at Simbi, let's go Simbi salaries. Two sites that I really like for this, it's going to be salary.com and PayScale. Salary.com is a little skewed high. PayScale is a little skewed low. And that's why I like those two, because you're going to get like an actual idea of what it really is. Some of these sites like Levels or like Glassdoor or whatever, people tend to lie. If you're asking somebody how much they make, they tend to tell you like 20% higher than what they actually make. Salary.com, I've noticed, is pretty middle of the road. PayScale is slightly less. And so if you're looking at what these possibly could pay, then that's what I would look at. So let's see if we can find some reviews here, like Ladders 126, Indeed, like this salaries.com is usually where I like to take a look if they have the data available. So right here, 83.6, 73 to 95. You can see right here, director of communication, so director level 225. You can see how much less this comes in versus like Glassdoor, where everybody's just bragging about how much money they make. So I always like, if you're going to use like a Glassdoor or Levels or any platform that like people self-report, just know that more than likely they're telling you 10 to 20 to 30% higher than what they actually make. And there's also this confusion that I've noticed with engineers where they confuse salary, like base salary, with total comp. Base salary and total comp are not the same thing. And that's why I'm like laughing right now, because it's not. Like total comp is like, what do you see in your wallet versus, salary is like what you see in your wallet. Total comp is like benefits and equity that vests over time and 401k match and bonuses and like that kind of stuff. So there's kind of two pieces, salary, and then you've got total comp. And so something to understand is like salary is like what they pay you. It's sometimes it's like bi-weekly or bi-monthly or weekly or however they have it. They pay you during your like pay period. And this is usually like the amount of money you've made. It's usually like your annual divided by 2 or however many pay periods they have. They split it out over the pay periods. This is like the actual amount. And then you've got your deductions for the government. So like Social Security and those withdrawals. And then you've got like any sort of like 401k contributions. And then you've got insurance if your employer has that kind of stuff. And then you've got this like total comp, which is like startups will offer you like equity packages. And those equity packages, they have vesting schedules. So yeah, you might see like, and there are plenty of people online that do this, where they tell you, I made, $500,000 as an engineer at whatever, Tesla, or engineer at Uber, or whatever, one of those types of companies. And they don't tell you that that's total comp. And of that total comp, like 300 of it or more, potentially, depending on where they work, is like vested stocks or something like that. And it takes, I've seen like 4 years is roughly what I've seen. Depends on the company. But I'm just trying to prove a point here. Like, just because somebody says they're making $500,000 a year doesn't mean they see $500,000 in their bank account. And honestly, this is like a little bit loaded, because again, going back to market-based wages, if you're expecting to make $500,000 in small town Nebraska working for a mom and pop engineering firm, never going to happen. Like, never going to happen. If you are expecting to make $500,000 working at a Fortune 50 company as a senior engineer, not going to happen. I don't know anybody that's making $500,000 like people are claiming to make in that scenario. Now, the only caveat would be the total comp might equate to $500,000, but you got to realize if 300,000 of it doesn't vest for 4 years, that doesn't mean it's annual. You're not making that every single year. You're getting a percentage of that is becoming yours over time in the form of stocks or whatever the arrangement is. And so what I always tell people is the goal, like from my opinion, the goal is to get your base salary as high as possible. And so for the purposes of this training, the goal is to have a base salary of $100,000. So that would mean you're making $100,000 a year plus benefits. That could even be like vacation time, plus equity, plus, bonuses, plus whatever, 401k match, whatever. You get the point? So like, that's kind of what I want you to think of when we're going through this, is like, what do we mean by 100,000? My meaning of that and my definition is like your base is 100,000 a year. So you're making like 33 or whatever a month. And that's split into 2 pay periods. So you're making about like 4,000-ish per pay period, before you have with like the government will take out money for taxes, they'll take out money for Social Security and that kind of stuff. And this obviously also assumes you're working in the US, because that's what I'm familiar with. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of point this out because, yeah, there's a lot of weird things people are saying on the internet these days. And so I just want to kind of be real with you. If you see that other people are talking about how they make $500,000 as an engineer, they're probably talking about total comp. They probably had a very specific situation that allowed them to get an equity package that vests over time. I don't know of anybody that makes $500,000. They have less than 2 years of experience, and they work as an engineer. I don't know that person exists. If you are that person, leave a comment below. I would love to know what specifically you're doing, because I think that would be cool to share with the group. But yeah, this is like the most realistic target, is like shooting for that $100,000 base, and then you can always negotiate other stuff on top of that. And if you're coming in with a associate's or a bachelor's degree and you're trying to figure out how to break 100, this is going to help you set that baseline so that you're never earning less than 100 by combining a bunch of things together appropriately. So we went through finding these. We went through putting together an actual list. Let's go back up to my checklist here. This would be a good time too to get a little drink of water. And to like this video if you think that this is a good use of your time and my time, because I've been wanting to put together kind of my cheat code here, and it's taken me some time to figure out how I want to present this. So I hope you guys like it, and if you do, let me know in the comments below. We talked about market rules and our career dashboard. So that career dashboard, we'll just quickly talk about it one more time, is this guy right here. Simple Google sheet to keep track of things. And one of the things that I've been telling everybody, whether they're in the bootcamp or they're in mentorship, is you need to start tracking what you're doing, the activities that you're doing, because if you think you're just going to apply to a job whenever you see it, and you're not keeping track of what you applied for, or where you're applying, or what resume you used to apply, you're not collecting the data around this, it's really difficult to figure out where the bottleneck is. Like, are you not getting callbacks? Is your resume not going through? Are you not applying for the right jobs? It's really tough to do that. And so I would recommend just setting up a very simple spreadsheet like this one. Keep track of all of the jobs that you're applying for and the statuses as you hear back. And then the resumes that you put together, you can just link your resume here. And that way you can figure out, okay, well, what resume did I send? That was the resume that's getting me interviews, so I'm just going to keep using this type of resume for this type of job and just doing more of what works. So that is what I meant by the career dashboard. So we can check that one off. Analyzing data and trends. So let's actually do this activity for a couple examples. So let's go back to that software engineering one, because I think it's just a cool case study to do. So we're going to keep going down this road of software engineer, working in robotics. So I've got my list here. Let's look at a couple more roles. Rule of thumb is we want something in the US. We want something that makes sense. I would say, yeah, as long as it's paying, 110-ish, 120-ish plus, I think we're in the clear for this. If it's a senior role, perhaps even a little bit higher, like this 100 to 200 range, you can even see like that's a loaded range. So my thought is like, cool, this is a good one to apply for. Let's find a few more and add them to our list. So this is Netherlands. We're not going to do that one. If you're in the Netherlands though, go check out that role. They're looking for somebody. Let's take a look at this one, 90 to 150. That's in our range. So that's good. It's remote. It's got the same kind of skill set. So is that still at Simbi? Let's find a different company. Simbi, let's look at chef. And you might be sitting here wondering, like, why am I doing this? I don't have the skills yet. Well, hold on, my friend. We are going to actually reverse engineer this. So let's find, well, that's loading. Let's close all these. And ideally you get like 30 of these or so, so you have a good sample size. So here's what they're looking for. 3 years of experience, 130 to 225. Cool. This is a robotics engineering role at Chef. Chef is really cool. I would highly recommend checking them out. So Chef, Robotics, Simbi Robotics. And then let's grab a couple more. Let's try to get like 4 or 5. Here's a dexterity. There are other job boards as well. So you can use Greenhouse, you can use Workday, Ashby. You can run this query on just about any company. While that's loading, let's head on over to the second way to find it, and that's going to be on LinkedIn. So this is such a stealth method. I don't know why more people don't do this. And basically what you're going to do is you're going to search robotics hiring. So keyword hiring. You're going to look for posts from the past 24 hours. So do this like daily while you're drinking your coffee. And you literally get to see who is hiring and what they're hiring for. So let's see, so ops engineering, I think is slightly adjacent to what we're looking for this case study, but let's go ahead and just take a quick peek to see. Megatronics, senior ops, this is probably what, like 7-ish years? Yeah. Let's see. PMP, master's degree, lean management. This is not what I thought it was going to be. Yeah, data. So I would say that's slightly adjacent from what we're looking for. Let's look at this system software engineer. That one might be closer. So 135 to 198 is kind of random numbers. Let's see. $20 million funded, B Garage, drones. So master's degree, 10 years of experience, proficient, C, C++. I'm going to put this on the list. I think this is for our case study. I think this is a little stretch. Let's look at B Garage though. B Garage. And let's take a look. Warehouse with autonomous drones. Interesting. Let's see what else they got. Ooh, they've got quite a bit here. Okay, cool. So they've got hardware, firmware, they've got some field engineering roles, robotics field engineer. Let's take a look at that one. See if that one might be closer to where we are at. 2 years, master's degree. Interesting. Let's look more at some of the software stuff. This is, let's see, are there anything in US? Let's make sure that we're looking at US roles. So we've got computer vision. Let's take a look at that one. That one could be interesting. Raw C++. Let's put it on our list. And then what I would do for these types of roles is now you've got this point of contact here. So the stealth thing to do is connect with Kimberly, excuse me, connect with her. And after you apply and just say like, hey, I just applied for this senior system software engineering role. Just wanted to connect, learn a little bit more about what you're looking for. Something simple like that. And we'll talk more about like LinkedIn networking and strategies, but this is another cool way to get jobs. So here's a role here for a robotics company that's looking for sales, so non-technical. So that could be quite interesting. Robotics intern, robotics engineer, junior level. Let's see, so staff software engineer. Let's take a look at that one because that one could be a good one to add to our case study. This one is Series C, site-specific forklift navigation infrastructure for the pallet handling. Very interesting. 7 years of experience with a bachelor's, master's, PhD. Let's grab that. 158 to 238. Interesting. Mentoring junior engineers. So let's grab that. And this was third wave automation. Okay, so what you would want to do obviously is spend some time filling out all of the columns here. And then what I like to do is just grab all of the ones that we were looking at. So let's look at this computer vision one, the third wave one, and then I would grab, so how you can make an impact, this is the responsibilities. So what we were talking about before about like, what is your role, what are your responsibilities? These are your responsibilities, and you can think of responsibilities as an applied skill. So like if you have the skill of C++ and Python, you need to be able to apply it in the context of what they do. So not just like knowing C++, but understanding how do we use it appropriately for this scenario. And a lot of reasons why professionals and engineers, they go through the boot camp is because they're trying to figure that out. They're trying to figure out like, okay, should I take a class on Python, or should I do a experience like the boot camp and use Python to solve a problem? And there's a bit of a mindset shift that has to happen to learn in that way, because you're learning while you're solving a problem while you're learning the skill, versus knowing the skill and going in and solving the problem. And actual engineering, and all of the engineering roles that I've had, never once did I come in knowing 100% of what we were going to be talking about. I always had to pick up new skills and apply them while I was learning the skill, because it just would be too slow. So that was the career dashboard. What we want to do now is we want to analyze data, and we want to look for trends. And so what we can do is when we're inside of the job descriptions, we're going to want to take note of all of the topics here. So C++, Python, let's go through here. C++, Python, ROS, PyTorch, Docker. And you're going to just want to kind of take note of all of the tools that you're seeing, or all of the applications or the responsibilities, the skill plus the application of what you're seeing. And you're going to want to note trends. So for our case study, let's draw that over here. We'll go back to my iPad so you can look at it. Basically what we want to do is we want to take a look at trends. So for our case study, we have Python, C++, ROS, Docker. Let's take a look to see what else. AWS. Just see. Ariel. That is not how you spell Ariel. Robots. Let's see. Let's look at third wave. I generally like to go to, they were the fork truck. Forklift, robots. Let's see. Modern machining, infrastructure-free pallet handling. Let's look at a few more of these. So we've got chef. Let's take a look at chef. Cool. Food robotics. Interesting. Let's see what their stack looks like. Machine learning, Python, C, C++. So we're seeing that again. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just going back into my checklist here. And this is like the quick and dirty napkin math way of doing this. You can do this right within your spreadsheet. Put columns of skills that you're seeing as headings, and then go through and just start, putting a 1. And then you can start adding up those columns for skills that you're going to be seeing. And then what I like to do is once I've done, like, ideally you want to do this like 30 plus roles. And you want to keep things centered or like focused. So like we're looking at trends for software engineering for robotics. Obviously, if you start putting field application engineer, mechanical engineer, customer service engineer, sales engineer, those types of roles, you're gonna get this wide range of skills and it's gonna feel impossible to learn things. That's why going back to the beginning of this video and defining your current state and what you want, using the skills that you already have to your benefit. If you are that person that I used as an example at the beginning and you're coming in as a mechanical engineer, you should not be doing trends for software engineering. If you want the fastest way to accelerate to the next level, you should instead be looking at mechanical for robotics. And so what I would recommend doing is going through this process, and when you go through the search and you're actually finding different roles, you're going to go into here, and instead of searching Python robotics, you'll search mechanical robotics, and you're going to start to see opportunities that may make more sense for your background. So let's take a look at a few of these. A lot of these are overseas. So if you're a mechanical engineer and you're looking for robotics in Europe, take a look at that. But here's a mechanical engineer for ambi robotics. And you're going to start to see these patterns and trends. So for the mechanical role, you're probably going to see things like CAD. You're probably going to see things like rapid prototyping. Let me switch over. You're probably going to see like things that you probably already know, right? Because you're coming from that domain. You're coming from that domain with an interest in the industry, the sector, the technology, the opportunity, right? And obviously, like, again, going back to market-based wages, you're going to get paid according to the responsibility, the role that you have, the level that you're coming in, and the environment that you work in. So just some things to keep in mind. I have engineers come into the programs that I run, and they have, I don't know, these kind of weird perceptions around how much money they think they should be earning because they heard somebody makes, $500K on the internet. And it's like, well, what are you actually working on, and what skills do you bring to the table? Because if you have a $500,000 a year skill set, then obviously you should be getting paid for that. But if you think you're going to come in as a junior level engineer, no experience, no projects, and you're being tactical, the odds of you making, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year doing that, pretty small. So just wanted to set some expectations with that. Let's head back to our list. So you kind of get the gist. You're just going to go through, you're going to find the trends for the roles that you've done, doing your research. And then now you've got what we're actually looking for, which are the most common or the most frequent skills that come up. Those are the ones that you're going to really need to hone in on and focus on so that you can be a competitive candidate for that opportunity. And that's why I like to do it this way. Obviously, you want to get a high enough sample size for this to make sense. We only did 4. I think we only really looked at 2. So that's not enough. Do like 30 of them and go through, read the job descriptions, make sure that they're, roles that you'd be excited to get an offer from, and they make sense for what you want next. And then put together this list of trends, go through and tally up the frequency, and then take the top 2 to 3 of what's commonly seen and get really good at those. And we're going to talk about what to do with that. So now that we have that, we can check off analyzing the skills and the trends, or analyzing the data and the trends. Now let's talk about skills versus TDP and the applications. So that is going to be number 5. Skills and TDP. So my method is called TDP. It stands for train, do, what we need to use in this situation as well. Now that we've got a whole list of skills from our previous step, let's just use the example of Python and C++ for that software engineering role. Then what we need to do is we need to figure out an application where we can utilize Python or C++ appropriately to demonstrate that we know what we're doing. So the two companies that we did a quick little review at, we have aerial robots and we have the forklift robots. I would pick one of those applications. If you notice a trend across the opportunities that you researched, then I would just pick whatever platform they use. So if it's mobile robots, if you're seeing more mobile robots than drones, then I would choose a project that's mobile. So mobile robot. And then I would go back to that company and I'd figure out, well, what are they solving for? A lot of times it is, so with the fork truck, it is how do we remove pallets from this operation, and we just have the robots organize things. Then what I would do is I would actually head over to their website and I would just get a feel for what kind of robots they're actually working on in the context of the environment that they're in. So it looks like these are autonomous fork trucks. They're moving pallets around, and then I would try to figure out, okay, what are their goals here? What are they actually building? What problem are they solving for? So I would just visit the company site and try to figure out the problems that they're solving. So problem. They solve, and getting really clear on that. So then the application we can just derive from, what if there was an autonomous fork truck that could move pallets around a warehouse without worrying about operators getting injured or needing to have operators work long shifts? We could have operators move to running a fleet of these robots, and the robots would be about the application. So that could be an application. Option. And I would go through all that whole list. So going back to our tracker, I would be looking at, okay, what else is on this list? So do we have any other like mobile platforms? And Simbi is actually a good example of this with a real world scenario. So we could look up Simbi as well. And they've got a mobile platform for a different purpose. And so they do multimodal shelf intelligence. So you've probably seen these in grocery stores where they're actually trying to figure out what products are going off the shelf. So like what's selling out quickly. So that's a different type of problem to solve, where you could possibly look at computer vision, scanning, intelligence, mapping, planning, figuring out the route to take for the robot, and doing so in a way that's not intrusive to shopping goers. So that could be a candidate as well for the project. Chef Robotics is, I believe, more arms. And then B Garage we looked at a little while ago. This one's more computer vision. I believe they're drone based, autonomous drone platforms. So what you want to try to do is compile a list of enough data, and that's why I always go back to having like kind of 30 pieces of examples before trying to build the perfect solution for one company and then finding out that there's only one company like them and they only care about one particular platform. If you can get a sample set that has, 30 examples of what's going on inside of the market, and more specifically in your market, because you may want to work in robotics, you may want to work in aerospace, you may want to work in industrial automation, you may want to work in AI. And so you're going to want to get a feel for what is the market paying for right now, and a good way to figure that out is who just closed rounds of funding and who's been around for a while. They say, and I forget the principle, but they say like the longer the company has been around means the more likely they are to be around for that same amount of time in the future. So a company that's 1 year old will probably be around for another 1 year. a company that's 100 years old will probably be around for another 100 years. That's kind of the philosophy. And so like if you can get examples from your market, meaning the place that you want to work in, and understand like what types of technologies, tools, systems, problems, like what are people solving for? Because at the end of the day, as engineers, we're just problem solvers. And so we're technical problem solvers. We use tech to solve problems. Then it's a kind of up to you to figure out, okay, well, where do I want to see myself going? And then if you notice by doing your research that investors are spending a ton of money on AI, which they are because it's been a buzz everywhere, then maybe you strategically pick to go into that industry because you know money's moving around and it's an opportunity to make more doing the same thing. So going back to kind of like my thoughts on market-based wages, like you can always make more money by choosing to go where the money is. And that should be obvious, but like I like my own experience and working with engineers, I just know like nobody's like spelling it out like this. People aren't like stating the obvious. Like if you want to make more money, you need to go where the money is. And if a lot of money is being invested in AI or data centers or connecting artificial intelligence with actual hardware, I know Tesla is doing that with their humanoid. We just looked at VM that just got that $30 million Series C. There are a lot of companies emerging right now that are trying to bridge the gap between what do we do with AI in the digital space to what do we do with AI in the physical space. And so you can just look at trends and follow press releases and current events to figure out where the money's being spent, and then use these principles and then just figure out kind of where you want to end up. Gather those 30 samples, and that's going to help you figure out, okay, what is the project that I can build that will basically prove that I know what I'm doing. And that's basically like our philosophy with the boot camp is like we want you to come in and have a 12-week roadmap that gets you from not knowing a lot about where you're going to end up or maybe having a vague idea of where you want to end up to having like undeniable proof in your portfolio that you actually can do the things that companies need you to do so that you have more than just a degree, more than just a certification, more than just 200 Udemy courses on your resume, and you actually have opinions about things, right? Because when you do these projects, and the reason why I love TDP so much is when you do the training part, you are here the least amount of time. You want to just get enough information to kind of know what you're doing. Like for training, it's like, okay, cool, I need a microcontroller, I need a program in C++, that's my platform, that's what I kind of think I'm doing, but you're just jumping, your goal is to jump into the doing with a project ASAP. Because honestly, this is where people actually learn the most is by doing it. Because the more times you do something, the more repetition you do something, the more you're like, wait a minute, I could have done this way better if I just done it this other way. And when you have that kind of realization, you can bring those opinions and those like qualified thoughts into interviews, into leading your team, into working with other engineers, to presentations. Like you can bring those opinions anywhere because you've actually lived it versus sitting in a class and like doing homework. And hopefully you understand kind of the difference between those two things. Because it's one thing to be able to sit and watch a PowerPoint and regurgitate the information on the quiz. The other thing is to be able to connect the dots and say, okay, cool, like the problem is this. So we need to do this. Or we need to test, trying this configuration. This is much more valuable than telling somebody you know C++, because honestly, AI knows C++, AI knows Python, but what AI doesn't know is how a customer is going to react to the solution using that product or using that skill or using that tool. And so that's why I love this method, because you're not going to get replaced by AI, even if you work in AI or even if you work in engineering. I would argue anywhere, if you understand how this all connects, how all these pieces connect together, and you're a little bit strategic with your execution. One good project with one good application that covers the myriad of things and topics that you found in your research, going back to putting together kind of our napkin math research, one good project with one good demonstration covering the most common things you're going to find within that sector of the market is a million times more valuable than taking classes on all these topics. And I would argue it won't take you as long. If you had to sit through a class on Python and sit through a class on C++ and sit through a class on ROS, that's 2 years of your time. You could get a project utilizing all three of these and walk away with much more tangible opinions about things and be much more qualified to speak on these topics if you spend 90 days working through a project, or you spend 12 weeks going through the Bootcamp and we tell you what projects to work on and we guide you through your schedule every step of the way. That is why you're here, because obviously you care about getting to the next level. It's what is the critical path. Sit through classes and hope that you get what you think you need out of it, and you hope that magic piece of paper is going to somehow get you through to the next level, or you build out your own strategy and you come in with your own qualified opinions and you're just clearly a better fit because you can not only articulate what you know how to do, but you actually have practical experience doing it. And that's really the biggest difference. So that last piece where I was talking about articulating is presenting. So that's the missing ingredient. This is the one thing I really, really, really wish that I did when I was in engineering school. So if you're still in engineering school, or you're in college, or you're taking a class right now, or you're following this methodology yourself, this is literally the golden nugget that if you don't take anything away from this training, this is the one thing you need to take away. It is, you need to do your presentations. I recommend using a tool called Vimeo Record. You can use whatever you want, but that's the tool we recommend. And you're going to, once you're done with your project, you are going to follow this format. You are going to give context on the application. Then you're going to give a quick demo of the flashing lights. I call it the flashing lights because when you're demoing something to somebody else, their attention span is like the span of a goldfish. So shout out if you're watching and it's past an hour. Most people don't have the patience or the attention span to sit through something longer than a few seconds. And so that when you bring in your demo as like the second thing, the flashing lights or the moving robot, it captures their attention and they want to naturally learn more because it's, robots are cool. So you give your little demo of it working. Then you explain the problem that it's the problem you're solving, but you're really just trying to define what the problem is. So what is the problem that you're solving for? And then what is your process? So the steps that you took to actually figure out the then solution. And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll tell people do a split screen, kind of like what I'm doing right now. I've got my whiteboard up and then I'm also on video. Do your demo, show the actual robot or prototype working, bring up your code or bring up your system diagram or bring up whatever as a visual reference, and then use that as part of the solution. So you can do code review. A lot of times I'll talk about gotchas, the thing that you're man, it was this one semicolon that I was missing and that was the reason why it took me 3 days to figure out why this wasn't working. Those gotchas or the lessons learned. Because I guarantee you, if you've made that semicolon mistake, you'll probably remember it. The lessons learned, and then the outcome. I know we're kind of bleeding into that other part of the document, but that is okay. So you want to kind of define okay, cool, we have this solution. What is the outcome or what is the impact? I think that's how you spell it. The impact of what you've actually presented. So why does this matter? And a lot of times it is a couple key ones: safety, safety from, like, look, going back to that fork truck example, it's like, well, why do we care about having an autonomous fork truck driver moving pallets around a warehouse? Well, we want to reduce the number of people getting injured in our facility. So if a robot does it, then our, EH&S, report is going to drop. So that's the impact of having this. It could be, revenue or profit. So if we have these robots and the workforce is now more efficient, then we, one, don't need as many people, but two, we could actually run 24/7 because a robot doesn't care if it's 1 a.m. or 1 p.m. So you could look at it through that. It could be procedural. Like sometimes a result of these projects is like a new policy or a new process or an update to an existing process to make it more efficient. So efficiencies. There's probably some other types of outcomes, but that's just to kind of give you an idea. And this is the process that we use when doing technical demos. Is you want to give context of the application so people know like the environment that you're in. They want to know kind of the boundaries as well, like your assumptions, your demo, like of it working, the problem that you're solving, the process that you took to come to the then solution. What was the solution? Do your code review, do your, if it's mechanical, do your drawing review the CAD, review the manufacturing files, whatever. Any gotchas or lessons learned, and then the outcome and the impact. That's the process that I recommend for these demos. And if you get really good at telling your presentations like a story, like a beginning, middle, and end, when you get in the habit of doing this, and in our boot camp we do this like 20 plus times across all the different projects, so by the 20th, honestly by the 10th, you kind of get into this cadence where you're just like, cool, I'm sitting here talking to a camera by myself in a room, and it starts to work itself out just by the nature of practicing. And so you can get into the habit of telling a story. This is beneficial for interviews. Tell me a time where you did this. Okay, cool. You have a time because you did it, right? And that's kind of the whole point of this whole process, where like all these little pieces fit together nicely. That's why it works so well. So it's good for interviews. It's good for like actual demos. If you get invited to speak anywhere, whether it's a conference or at your company or to, share with your team, then you're not going to be afraid to stand up and present like Liz, give me an update on what you did this last month on XYZ project. And then I'm not sitting there thinking, well, what do I say? And so practicing that kind of storytelling pattern, this is nice too, because you can buzz through this in 5 to 10 minutes. And you don't have to drone on. Now, if you're in an interview, I always recommend under 2 minutes and then ask for a follow-up. Let the person interviewing you ask you more questions. Don't draw it out, for 5, 10, 15 minutes. Pause after a couple minutes and request some feedback. And that'll give you the opportunity to address the topics that they're most interested in versus you talking about things that maybe they don't care about. So that's basically train to present. This is our methodology. I love this methodology because it's pretty straightforward and it works for any topic or skill that you want to learn. I'm trying to navigate back to our checklist. Let's find it. And we are right here. The right projects, moving on to number 6, is going to be dependent on your research. So going back to this whole process, we are reverse engineering. We are not linearly taking skills in this process, because if you do that, it's the roundabout way to get to where you want to go. What we are actually doing, let me draw it over here, is we are going job, skills, but we are only doing the popular ones. If you see, let's use a random example. If you see Docker once on a list of 30, do not waste your time on Docker. Same with ROS. Like, people have this misconception that every single robot uses ROS, when in reality, if I were to poll 10 engineers that work in robotics and ask them if their day-to-day involves ROS, I'm more likely to get a no than I am a yes. And so you've got to kind of figure this out based on the market that you're in. And if you do have a ROS background, you may want to optimize your list for companies that use ROS, but a lot of people come in thinking they need a skill. Like they're trying to match a skill with a job. And that's very dangerous because you don't know what this is. Like you don't know what the market wants. And so what I tell people is look at the jobs first. Figure out where you're currently at, what you can leverage, what your skills are, what you're coming in with. Do your market-based wage activity first to figure things out, because you could start looking for jobs, let's say as a mechanical engineer in robotics, and your goal is to make, $150K a year. I'm just making this up. And you may realize that the market just doesn't have anything available. That might be the sad reality. And so if you spend all this time becoming a master of SolidWorks because some bozo on the internet told you need to spend, 6 months in a class taking a SolidWorks course, or whatever CAD course, could be any of these tools, then you're just wasting your own time. And you'd be better off saying, okay, well, if it isn't SolidWorks that's going to get me to the next step in my career, what other moves could I make? And then you could redo this assessment and you could say, well, if mechanical is off the table, could I go manufacturing? Could I go that manufacturing route? Do some of my skills transfer over? And my answer to that is probably yes. Could I leverage my skills in that way? How could I get myself to that 150 level? And I'll give you kind of a case study of this. If you go the manufacturing route, you can start out as a manufacturing engineer. Then you can become a senior engineer. And then you can become a manager. And I actually have a really good friend right now, shout out Aaron, who made it to this level. And I'm not going to drop his salary here, but he makes over 150K a year. He makes more than that. And this process took him, 7 to 8 years. Maybe less. I don't actually know. But realistically, you're not going to go, month one right out of school and jump into a manager role, right? There's lessons that need to happen between this. And again, when I say making a certain amount, I'm talking about base salary. So you technically could make 150 if you factor in your benefits and your vacation time and your 401k match. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about base. I'm not talking about total comp, which people on the internet don't understand. So I'm trying to be more real with these numbers because I don't know who's teaching anybody about numbers these days, but some of the numbers that I hear from people don't make a lot of sense. So anyways, you want to start with the job first, reverse engineer back, and make sure that the projects that you're building make sense. So if you're seeing a ton of mobile robotics and that's the industry that you want to be in, then I wouldn't be spending time building drones. If you're looking to get into AI and you're seeing a lot of digital, data analysis, data analytics, data engineering, I wouldn't be spending time prototyping robots and learning a manufacturing process. So the right project is going to depend on the type of role that you're moving into. And we, in our program, we do a more holistic approach. So there are fundamental skills that are helpful and fundamental applications where you can pick and choose different concepts and topics that can translate over to just about anything. But as you get more advanced, specificity does matter. So for example, we do a project called the Healthy Plant Monitor, and it's designed to help people learn inputs and outputs, analog versus digital, work with microcontrollers, learn how to code, go through that process of creating libraries, understand objects, and you can take it up a next level and actually learn how to collect data, how to publish and subscribe to data, create an Internet of Things or web-based collection system, and go through this whole process, right? And so the whole point of that isn't for you to say, I know C++ or I know how to use a microcontroller. The whole point of that is for you to be able to go to an interview and for them to ask you, okay, well, what experience do you have? And now you have a story to tell them versus saying, oh yeah, I took a class on that. Because guess what? Everybody's taking a class on that. 7-year-olds are taking classes on that. AI can do the coding now. And so the differentiator is being able to prove that you know what you're doing by having this actual tangible experience and putting it into a portfolio and then having the confidence to present on it. So that quote unquote right topic is going to be dependent on the market that you want to be in and that next step. We talked a little bit about presentations and demos, so we'll just continue on. I want to talk a little bit specifically about resume and LinkedIn optimization. There are some cool strategies here. For resumes specifically, there's a couple schools of thought on this. And my school of thought is you want to tailor your resumes to the role. So you're going to come up with your 30, ideally, more realistically, 300 roles. The more of these roles that you can get, the better. And I do have a video that shows that walks you through exactly how to use an AI operator to find these roles, so you're not sitting there trying to pull them yourself. But ideally, you pull a pool of roles, and you have a tracker, just like this one, and you have your 300. You know the skill sets. They're all roughly the same type of roles, and they have the same types of responsibilities. They're the same, types of technologies. You're not all over the place. You have a consolidated focal point. And then what you do is you go through and you have a baseline resume, right? That's going to serve for, let's say, a software engineering role for a robotics company. But then what you want to do is go into each job posting, and you want to use the same language that the company uses. So if they call robotics Megatronics, then you use the word Megatronics, not robotics. You're speaking their language in their industry, and you're building it out tailored to that particular role. So my first tip is to tailor your resume. And I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. And you want to use language from the role. And you're also going to want to prioritize what they say. So if they don't mention Ross and they're a robotics company, I wouldn't be bragging about how you know Ross, because honestly, they probably will look at that and say, okay, cool, but that's not relevant to us because we don't use Ross. So you want to just kind of focus on what they want. And hopefully you can read my messy handwriting here. So you want to focus on what they want, because at the end of the day, you are coming in and you are there to solve the company's problem. And their problem is they don't have somebody that has the skill set that the job description says they're looking for. So you want to give them undeniable proof that you are their solution. And in return, they're going to pay you for doing that work. So you want to position yourself as the solution to their problem. And the only way to do that is you need to understand their problem. You need to understand the company's problem. You need to understand what they're targeting. So what is their mission? What is their vision? What are their values? These all sound like corporate buzzwords, but it's true. In like every big company, they have a mission. They have a vision. And they have values. And ideally, you know what these are, and these become more and more important as you head into interviews with them and as you have conversations with them, because they need to be aligned with you. Because if they're not, and you're trying to fake it, and you're trying to put yourself into a mission or vision or values that you don't personally resonate with, people will know. It just comes across like people just know. So ideally, you make sure that they are aligned. You understand what the problem is. You understand how you can come in and solve that problem. All of the roles that I have gotten was because I was able to articulate that I knew what their problem was and I was the right person to solve it, and I gave them an example. And that example was my project. And I have lots of projects. So ideally, as you're going through the boot camp, you're going to be building your projects and you're going to be thinking to yourself, you're going to have your list of where you want to end up. You already kind of know what you're trying to get out of this. You're going to be strategic, and you're going to be able to take all these different projects and you're going to be able to say like, cool, if they ask me about X, Y, and Z, I've got project A. If they ask me about, DEF, I'm going to be able to say like project B as my like proof, as like the solution, and be able to tie it back to what they're looking for. So for resumes, we do have some templates. We have our winning resume template. We have our 6 and 2 resume template, I think it's called. All of those templates can be found in the career resources inside of the bootcamp. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find a link to join the bootcamp below this video, but all of the templates are in there. You can utilize those. A couple of tools that I recommend. One of them is, let's see if we can find it. I'll bring it up and we can just kind of walk through it. The first one is called Resi.ai. And I'm not like the hugest proponent of doing AI resumes because everyone is doing it. And it's when everyone does something, it's better to do the opposite of what everybody else is doing, because it naturally will allow you to stand out. So if everybody is just using ChatGPT to generate their resume or using AI to generate their resume, then does anybody actually know what they're doing? So that becomes the first question. Or is AI just generating the perfect candidate and everybody's perfect, so everybody should therefore then get the job? So my opinion is you want to set up your resume and make sure that it can get through the ATS. So a tool for that would be JobScan. And it's this tool right here. And you can just go through and make sure that it'll even get through the ATS or the applicant tracking system, because the worst thing that could happen is you have a really great resume, but for whatever reason it's formatted wrong and nobody sees it. So check, you can use something like JobScan, you can use something like Resi to get kind of a starting point. But then what I would do is I'd take these AI generated resumes and I would go through and compare them to the job description and make sure that they actually are tailored with appropriate keywords and they're formatted correctly and that everything on that resume is truthful. Because I've seen a lot of people, they'll generate these quote unquote perfect like ChatGPT style resumes, and like 80% of the stuff on that resume is like fake. Like it's not real metrics, it's not real contributions, it was just like fluff stuff that they added in there. So just do that and like be honest with it. I mean, like, people can tell, like if you're submitting like a quote unquote 1-for-1 perfect resume and a recruiter does look at it, they're not going to be like, wow, we just found like our magical unicorn. They're going to maybe wonder like, is this person real or did they just use AI to do this resume? And if they don't think about the fact that it could be AI generated, they'll know right away when they invite you into an interview and they start asking you questions thinking you're this magical unicorn person that they've been looking for forever and you can't answer them. So that's the other like thing to keep in mind, is like you just want to make sure that you're being honest and truthful with this. We do have some like templates that we've found to be high converting, the winning resume being one of them, especially for startups. And then we've got a manufacturing template that works well for more like corporations, like that one pager that works pretty well. And then that's basically it for resume. I want to move on to talking a little bit more about LinkedIn. So we did resume. Let's talk a little bit about LinkedIn optimization. LinkedIn optimization. So I'm going to just bring up a LinkedIn profile and let's see if we can just get kind of an example here of a LinkedIn profile. Yeah, there's a bunch of them here. Let's take a look at these. So let's see. So here is a LinkedIn profile, very kind of simple. So a couple things about LinkedIn profiles that, and this is again my opinion on things, you want to have a clear picture of yourself that is recent. So I work with a lot of professionals and they always pick their favorite picture from like 7 years ago. And in 7 years, people look a lot different. I bet if you went back and looked at my old videos, you'll notice that I look way different now than I do then. And that is just the normal part of life where you just look different as you get older. And so I would make this as recent as possible. Don't stretch more than like a year or two, especially if you've had like a dramatic glow up where you either look older than you currently are in your picture, or you've lost a lot of weight or something like that. I know personally, I've gone through that where when I was working in corporate, I gained a lot of weight. And then after I left corporate, I lost a lot of weight. So I don't look the same. If I'd kept that picture from, 7 years ago, I wouldn't even look like the same person. And you want your picture to look like you, as close to you currently as you can, because there's nothing worse than getting onto a Zoom for an interview with somebody and then the person's expecting to see you with the profile picture that you put up there and you look nothing like the profile picture. And I've had that happen personally where I'm interviewing candidates and I'm expecting to see somebody because they're obviously going to go to your LinkedIn before they interview you. That's the number one place they're going to go is your LinkedIn. And if your picture looks like nothing like you and then you show up to this interview, they have kind of this preconceived notion of who they're going to see on the call. And then you show up and you look totally different, it's going to throw your interview off, like in a negative way. So have an updated picture. This one's good because he's facing the camera. It's a nice clear shot of him and his face. So you don't want to be I love these pictures where it's like a family photo and somebody just takes it's like a wedding picture of a family photo and they just take a circle of their face out of that and you can see somebody's ear in the background. Try to avoid that. Just get a picture taken of yourself. Everybody has a camera in their pocket now. Grab a quick photo of yourself and make sure that it's clear, it's not blurry, and it looks like you today. Now, my thoughts on these AI generated portraits, I would tend to say no to those. Every AI generated portrait that I've ever done and used doesn't really look like me. And I just think that, again, going back to what I was saying, if everybody's doing it, you should do the opposite. If everybody's generating their AI portrait, then you should just take a real picture of yourself and put it up there because it's more authentic. The other piece is the banner in the background. There are some better examples of this. This one I think could be interesting to look at. Here, compliantly higher pay, managed talent, 185 countries. That's good. He's smiling. He's got a nice picture. That I think is kind of cool. He's got his company banner. If you want to put a robotics banner, we have some templates in the career resources that you can pull from, some Canva templates to make a really nice banner and make sure that it's nice and clean. You can just put what kind of role you're interested in or the industry, robotics and automation, and then have a picture of a mobile robot or a drone or something in the background. That could be kind of interesting. Here's another one right here, automate some pictures here. That looks cool. So having a banner is important. I would recommend it and make sure that it's relevant to the type of work that you want to do. So if you want to get into robotics, I wouldn't have I don't know, a picture of food or something unless it was a food robot. Here's a cool one right here. This guy's a real estate broker and he's got kind of his info up here if you're comfortable with that, or you want to put your business line or something like that. Let's actually take a look at that. That's a good example of how to set it up. Let me see. It's not going to let me. So let's just zoom in a little bit on this if we can. So he's got his name, he's professionally dressed, he's smiling, he looks at the camera, he's got a nice little background here. I would say this is a good setup. And then obviously you want to put your name as you want people to call you. I've made this mistake over the years. It's if you want somebody to call you Liz, don't introduce yourself as Elizabeth. Just put your preferred name there, unless for whatever reason you have to have an official first name. I just kind of got into the habit of just like introducing myself the way I want people to call me, because that first impression, like if you introduce yourself as Elizabeth, but you want people to call you Liz, they're going to just see you as Elizabeth because that's how you introduce yourself. So just like a little tip there. And then you want to have a really rich headline that is keyword packed. And when we go through the LinkedIn Bootcamp, we'll do a full deep dive on like how to set this up for you. But for this real estate broker, he did a really good job. So I'm just going to basically tell you kind of the formula. You want to say what you are, like your job title, like what your expertise is or your area of focus. And then what I'll tell engineers is if you have any like buzzword companies, like let's say I'm talking about me, robotics engineer. And then I would do like my specialty, like if I was focused in, AI implementation. I'm just making this up, by the way. And then what I would do on the same line, I'll move it down here. And then you might even see this with me on LinkedIn. I put X Raytheon, blah, blah, blah. And then I'd put like some keywords or topics. So this would be like keywords that are searchable in that industry. So I might put like startup, or I might put like Ross or OpenCV, or I would name like some machine learning principles or whatever. I would use buzzwords going back to the research that we did. So like if you're commonly seeing, AI/ML terminology, or you're constantly seeing ROS 2, then I would be putting those keywords in the headline so that when people are searching for that, your profile comes up. Then you also want to make sure that you've got let's go back to here. You want to make sure that you have your company. So you attach your company to your profile, and then your university, you attach that to your profile as well. And that way you're getting like, when somebody lands on your profile, you're getting like a really optimized, what they call above the fold. So when a page loads, there's information that's below the page break. So anything above that, you want to make sure is optimized. And so if I landed on Laren's profile, then I'd be like, whoa, I know exactly what this guy does, because it was optimized for that. So let's take a look at a few more. So here's a profile that's kind of cool. So Rob's profile. Here's another one with the backgrounds. The more of these you look at, the more you're like, whoa, okay, cool. Like there is a strategy to this. Let's see. Right here. So PhD, branding specialist. Like if you have a PhD, if you have EIT, if you're a professional engineer, you have FE, if you have any of these like PMP, if you have any of that, you want to put that in your headline, or after your name. If LinkedIn allows it, I think they do allow it. So like this profile here allows you to put like your alphabet soup at the end. So I would put that in there if you have it. So this is a good one. Genevieve's profile is a good one here, because she has her name and then all of her credentials and then what she is, and then driven to deliver excellence. With hers, I would be a little more specific, and I would almost choose like industry sector. So like if you're interested in aerospace robotics, then I'd be specific, and I would talk about like flying cars. I always go back to that example because there is such a thing as flying cars, and it is a subset sector of robotics that most people don't know about, even in aerospace. And so you can be really specific with those types of keywords. Position yourself almost like a specialist. So I just wanted to touch on that. We'll be diving deeper into LinkedIn and how to optimize your profile in the LinkedIn Bootcamp, but those are just like the key findings. Like if you can have a really clear photo, an optimized banner, make sure your headline is complete, and then your school and your current job are updated, that'll get you like the bulk of what you need done. And then obviously going through and optimizing your jobs. So your about section, and then you want to have kind of clear bullets for your roles. So the previous experiences that you've had, you want to talk almost similar to how we do the presentations, where you're giving context, you're talking about the problem, you're showing people the solution, you're guiding them through your process, you're giving them the outcomes. That's where like a lot of the quantitative results, like increased X by Y%, like that everybody does. Like you're going to want to include that in your LinkedIn to show like your outcomes, like what you were responsible for. Basically your results. And the cool part about the bootcamp is if you don't have any of those quantitative results, you are going to get them by doing this project or by doing all of these projects. We have more than one. There's 20 plus projects. And so I guarantee you'll be able to create some of these quantitative results to show that you have experience doing just that by completing this program. So I think we did it for the resume and the LinkedIn optimization. Let's spend a few minutes here talking about applications, volume, and tracking, because this is also a big one that trips people up. So let's go over here this time. I'm going to switch to another color. Let's go to red. We are looking at number 9. Volume. This is where you're going to be spending time using your tracker to go through I always say 300. It's like the rule of 300. 300 roles. And the reason why I like the number 300 is because it's enough volume to realistically get you results in the market that we're currently in if you're targeted. So again, don't skip to this and just start applying for things until you've gone through the full process. There's a reason why this is number 9 and this isn't number 1. So you're going to use your tracker with all of the data that you've pulled from your research. And ideally, you do this sooner rather than later. And like you're doing this in parallel, right? Because you're going to be building projects, networking, optimizing your LinkedIn, and applying for roles kind of in a stack. You're not going to do this linearly. So ideally, you're going to be research, TDP, apply. You're going to be doing like this. If this was like kind of a project, like almost like a Gantt chart, this is kind of how it would flow. Like you're going to be kind of, I always tell people, like you're stair-stepping your way through this process. You're not going to be pigeonholing yourself into a linear, one step at a time thing, because if you do that, what will happen is the jobs that you found in this research stage won't be open by the time you finish your projects. And so ideally you're working your way through both at the same time. So you're doing a lot of things at once. You're learning skills, you're applying skills, you're presenting skills, and you're talking and networking, and you're optimizing yourself, and you're doing interviews. You're doing applications and interviews. It's all happening in the same vertical, like this. Like all of this is happening simultaneously. So if we were to look at like each day or each week, you would see like multiple things are happening at once. So hopefully that makes sense. A lot of people, again, going back to the traditional way of school, is like, oh, we got to go through the curriculum in order. It's like, yeah, you can do that. And a lot of people do. But there's a reason why this is faster. It's because you're only looking at the things that matter and you're throwing away the things that don't, and you're doing multiple things simultaneously. You're like, if they ask you when was a time that you were good at multitasking, this is a time when you were good at multitasking. This whole activity is like the epitome of multitasking, because as you're making progress on one thing, you're also trying to make progress on another. So as you're building in a solution to the application, learning, let's say, a new technology, implementing let's say motor control into your project, you're also applying for roles that need somebody that understands motor control for mobile robots at a robotics startup. Like, you're doing everything all intentionally, and it is happening all at once. And that's why I think a lot of people, they almost get addicted to taking courses or watching videos, because this is hard. This is difficult to do, especially if you don't know what you're doing or how you're planning this out, or you have the unknown unknowns. And that's why the boot camp exists, because we understand it's like juggling on a unicycle while, playing soccer. There's a lot of things going all at once. And so you 100% can execute this, but it is helpful to understand kind of what am I doing when, and having that schedule. A lot of times people will come to us and they'll say, oh, this is kind of like a like working with a personal trainer, or like doing fitness related things, right? Because you've got your diet, you've got your water intake, you've got your workouts, you've got your recovery. It's like you're doing a lot of things simultaneously. And if you do that over 12 weeks, a lot of fitness trainers will say you can make significant progress in your athleticism and your aesthetics in just 90 days of being consistent by doing all of these things at once. Is it easy? No. Is it simple and straightforward? Yes, but you have to execute over a long enough period of time. So that's why I tell people, target 300. I'm going to show you kind of the mind map for this. So if you do 300, and these are like the KPIs or the key performance indicators or benchmarks that you're aiming for with this 300. So 300, it's usually kind of the rule of thirds. You're going to have 100 applications where they say no. You're going to have probably 100 applications where they don't reply. They just ghost you. You don't hear anything from them. And then you're going to have probably 100 that are yes. And so then this kind of happens a bunch of times, okay? So you're going to see, let's say, 33 of them. After that first yes, you get a no. Then after that first yes, you get another yes. And then you get a no reply. Okay? And depending on how many stages of interviews, I know, like, depending on the tech company you're at, if you're at a startup, they might have like 7 rounds of interviews for you. I don't know. But the idea here is after you kind of break this down, eventually you'll get to this position, and let's just continue extrapolating this out so that you can see the concept. You'll have kind of like this tree here where you have 11 no's, and then you have no reply. Let's extrapolate this out one more time. And then you have like basically 4, 4, 4. And these 4 end up being like offers. If I can spell. So like what you're targeting here, and this is kind of like moral of the story, is you're targeting like these 4 to 10 offers so that you have leverage. So if you only apply to 10 jobs and, half of them, 2/3 of them, they say no, or you never hear from them, you're not giving yourself enough opportunities to get yeses. And so when people come into the program, and especially in mentorship, we're really trying to ramp you up to hit this 300 so that you're in the best possible situation to get a yes. And this process takes, the fastest I've seen it done is like 3 weeks, but more realistically, this takes 90 days. So if you can front load your work with the 300 applications, and if you're poo-pooing submitting 300 applications, then that's okay. You don't have to do 300 applications. You can do whatever you want to do. But if you're not willing to put in the effort to get the $100,000 plus base salary, then you need to really reconsider whether or not you're cut out to be somebody that earns multiple 6 figures a year. Because majority of the people, and I work with a lot of high agency people, majority of the people see this and they're like, cool, I know what my benchmarks are. I'm just going to go do it. Worst thing that happens is nothing, but that's better than attempting or not attempting, because you're guaranteed nothing if you don't even attempt. Whereas this, just from like a mathematics standpoint, you're putting yourself in a position that over the next 90-ish days, you're going to have potentially 4 to 10 offers on the table, and you already have optimized for them to be $100,000 or more because you've done your research. You understand market-based wages. You're going into it knowing like you're playing to your strengths. You're obviously only applying to roles that if they presented you an offer, you would say yes. That's the other piece. Don't just apply for the sake of applying. Apply to things that if they were to present you an offer, you would say yes to it if it made sense. And so then you get a bunch of these $100,000 plus offers on the table, and now what do you have? You have leverage. Because you don't have to just pick one. You have multiple opportunities on the table. You can take some time to review all of the offers on the table, and you can set yourself up to negotiate. And the other thing that's kind of cool about this is because you're focused and you've gone through market-based wages, you're going to actually get real time what the market is willing to pay for those skills. So we can do an analysis of market-based wages using PayScale and Salary.com, or taking a 20% haircut off of what people are reporting on Levels or Glassdoor or whatever nonsense. These actual job offers, though, will give you the real-time market rate for that role. And so ideally, you're going to be getting potentially 4 to 10 offers. And these are baseline metrics. You might get less than this. You might get more than this. This is just kind of like what to target, okay? What to shoot for from a volume standpoint. So with these 4 to 10 offers, presuming you applied to similar type roles, meaning the role, the level at which you're working, and the responsibilities are similar, at similar type companies, they should be within the same range. I would argue that they're probably going to be like plus or minus 10%. So let's just say like we're targeting those $100,000 base roles. Anything from 90 to 110 is probably going to be like your median. And you'll probably have one company that'll offer you something outrageous like 130, but then you might notice that they are in a high cost of living area, like a San Francisco or a Manhattan or something like that. But this is what I would be expecting, right? And obviously this number is going to be based on your number. I'm just using this as our baseline, right? Because this is the only video that you need to get a 6-figure career in a tech job, because I'm telling you exactly what to do and how to think through this whole process. And then you can just kind of plug and play your numbers and just execute the process for wherever you're at in this spectrum. The principles generally stay the same up until you get to about that $500,000 a year mark. But when you're making $500,000 plus a year, you're usually senior in the company. And so so leadership and that kind of stuff is slightly different. Incentives are slightly different. So for majority of my audience watching this, your goal is probably that $100,000 to $300,000 a year mark, and this will help you do just that if you execute it. Cool. Volume. Takeaways from this: 300. If you only apply to 3 jobs and you're mad that you didn't get an offer, try applying for 297 more jobs. Ideally, you front load this and you do this in 1 to 2 weeks while you're building out your projects. So if you were to look, going back to this Gantt chart, you have kind of this 90-day buffer right here, and it's the same 90 days. Now, I know it's a lot of work, but there are a lot of people that spend hundreds of thousands of dollars per year to get a degree. They spend 40 hours a week in that degree program, and then they leave that program in hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, and they still don't have a job. So if that is you, this process can work for you, because you're used to working a lot and you're used to paying other people, paying universities and tuition to go through this. And so if you spent your time doing this instead, I believe that it's a higher leverage activity than sitting through more classes if you want to make money. Now, if you want to be an academic, totally different story. If you want to be an academic, you shouldn't be watching this, because this is like a practical way to make 6 figures a year And most academics, they don't care about making money. They care about finding the next novel thing. They care about the pride of being really smart. And I know this because I went down that road, and then I realized that I wanted to actually earn a great living for my skill set. I want to be paid for the skills that I had and for the ability to solve problems in unique ways. And I realized that academics, it's really hard going down that road unless you get like a 1% job. It's really hard to make a lot of money as an academic. And you need a ton of education, and you need to pay for that education, both in time and in money. So it's more like academic servitude. Is that even a word? But it's like you're an academic, almost like a guide. You know, you're doing it out of the goodness of research. And if that is you, this process is probably not going to resonate with you. But if you're somebody that is in academics and you're like, well, how could I use all of these skills and get paid a lot of money for what I know? This process will help you solve that problem. And you're going to want to stair stack or do things in parallel so that you're maximizing your time. It's the same 90 days, but you're doing a lot. You're very productive in these 90 days going through this process. And it all starts with having that game plan. So hopefully that makes sense. I think we're good on volume and tracking. You've got your tracker, so as you're going through this, you're going to be calculating your yeses, your nos, your no follow-ups, and you're going to be able to use the spreadsheet to keep track of how many jobs did you find, how many did you apply for, what stage of the process are you in, how many callbacks are you getting. And then you can even take the callbacks, like let's say you're getting interview requests, and you can see what resume did you submit to get that interview. And if you notice a trend that, let's say, one version of your resume is performing better than another version, that's A/B testing, then you just do more resumes with that format to those types of roles, and it's higher probability that you'll actually get an interview because you're tracking your numbers. So now let's shift gears. Let's talk a little bit about networking. We've got digital networking and in real life networking, and how you can use networking to speed things up. And I've been talking a lot about networking these last couple weeks with mentorship clients and in the bootcamp as we come up with better ways of doing things. First and foremost, I think in the current state of the market, in real life, IRL networking is more powerful than the digital. Everyone's trying to be, grow their follower count and whatever on the internet. And there's just a lot of people that are trying to be experts where they have no qualified opinions. And so I tend to think like this digital thing, like we're going to talk about the strategy if you want to do it. I know a lot of people that have done this successfully, and they are thought leaders in the space. So I'm just going to tell you exactly what to do, and you can decide to do it or not. I think the real advantage is in real life, so in-person networking. And we're going to start with that first, because I don't really think anybody's talking about it. So the first one is in-person networking. And when I say in-person, there's really one key event that I'm talking about, and that is career fairs. I think, unpopular belief, I think that if you have the opportunity to go to a career fair and you have the right approach for the career fair, which I'm going to tell you what the approach is, the right approach that actually works, that will get you offers, that is more powerful than futzing around on LinkedIn and trying to build your follower count, trying to be a thought leader. I think it's the faster way to do it. And if you have the ability to attend a career fair, I would choose that hands over doing the actual online networking. So career fairs, there's really there's probably more than two categories, but the way I see it is you've got your alma mater career fair, meaning the university that you went to or that you're currently going, they usually host a career fair. And if they don't, your school is probably in a consortium or near other schools, and you can go to their career fairs. Usually that happens. Very rarely do I talk with somebody that's a student at a university and they've never heard that their school runs a career fair. They all typically do. And then the option is non-school affiliated career fair, meaning you just find a career fair that's running locally and you attend it. I'm going to speak from the alma mater, the university career fair, because I think there's a lot of leverage going to those, and most people don't know what they're doing when they go to those. So first tip is to go to your school career fair. Now I'm going to speak from my experience. So I went to WPI, and I believe they still do this. We could actually fact check. Let's actually check to see if they do this. WPI career fair. And would you look at that? They still do it. Years later, they still do it. They have a career fair. Now, this career fair already happened, and I was going to say WPI, they do a fall fair, and they do a spring fair. And I know this because I went to them, and if you read my story, which is on the website, you can read more about my story with this. I had a really hard time in my first career fair, a really hard time. And I went there thinking I was just going to talk to people, they were going to like what I had to say, and they were going to give me a chance. And if your strategy is hope, hope is a bad strategy. You need to actually have a strategy, not hope. Hope is a hard strategy to gauge on because there's a lot of competition right now. And if you can't articulate what separates you from somebody else, they're going to choose the person that can. Because they want the path of least resistance. They want the critical path to finding the solution to their problem, which is filling the role that they need help with. And so what I would recommend doing is signing up, registering for the career fair. Now, if I'm not mistaken, if you've already graduated, I believe you can still go back to your alma mater's career center and you can still register for those career fairs. You can still go to them, even if you've already graduated. And honestly, if you're in a pinch and you do need a new opportunity or you're serious about leveling up, I would make it a priority to go. I would clear my schedule and I would be going to that, especially if I was unhappy with my current role or I was out of a job and I didn't have a job. And so I would sign up for the career fair, and they usually tell this well in advance. They do, I know at WPI it's like fall and spring, and I think a lot of schools are like that. It's fall and spring. You just need to register. And then this is my approach. We'll go over here. So what I would do is I figure out who is at the fair. So the companies. And WPI's career fair is awesome. So I don't know if it's open to other people who are not part of their alumni network or registered students. But if you're an engineer and you can find yourself in the WPI career fair, they have really awesome options. So shout out WPI, I love you. They got me my first co-op, and that co-op turned into the foundation of my career. And it took me a couple years to really understand how to approach these and how to have converting conversations with people, because there is a methodology to this. You don't just walk in and here's my resume and they just want to give you a job. There's a strategy. So the first step that you want to do is you want to figure out who is going to be there. And then on that list, you need to figure out the top 30 to 50 that you want to talk to. And WPI, they have, I don't know if they tell you how many people or how many companies. They have to have hundreds, I think. I'm just going to look to see quickly if they have any insight as to how many people or how many companies are going to be there. It already passed, so I think it's going to be hard to find that information. Let's see, audiences. Oh, they do allow general public. Little tip, if you're in the Massachusetts area and you're an engineer and you want to get yourself a 6-figure role, base salary role, WPI's career fairs are apparently open to the public and you can register for them. Don't quote me on that. Check the website and obviously follow their guidelines, but they usually have hundreds of companies. You want to pick your top 30 to 50, and again, I keep coming back to that 30 number because it's like a baseline of statistics, right? If you just talk to 2 people and they both say no, then like your chances are smaller, but if you have more people to talk to, you have more opportunities to get those yeses. So you want to plan that out. Then you want to look at the map for the fair. And I don't know, I'm speaking from when I went there and how it was set up when I was there. I think they would do it. They had it in the gym. And so they would have it set up like, here's the gym. And then they'd have all these like rows like this with tables. If you've never been to a career fair, this is probably foreign, but if you've been to a career fair, just imagine these lines are like rows of tables, and they'd have tables on either side. And each table is a company with people around it, and like they're very busy events. And so what you want to do is you want to get this map ahead of time. Why? Because you're an engineer and we're going to be optimizing this path. So if you know that there's companies, these blue dots are the companies that you want to talk to, and you already have that highlighted on your handy dandy map, and you head into the career fair and you know this ahead of time, then what do you get to do? You get to look to see, okay, how busy is it currently? Where are the lines that are wrapped around the world? Because companies like the Apples, the Googles, the Microsofts, the Raytheons, the Lockheeds, the name brand companies, those ones usually they draw a crowd. And you're going to want a mix of some of these larger companies and smaller companies, and then also random companies you walk by that you see their booth and you're like, whoa, that's cool. I didn't know that existed. And you want to leave space and time for that, but you also don't want to be walking aimlessly around the career fair, because when I was there, it was always about 30 degrees hotter in that building than the temperature outside. At least that's what it felt like. So like if it was 30 outside, it felt like it was 70, 80 degrees inside of that career fair, purely because of the number of people there. It would just get really hot. And so you don't want to be walking aimlessly around. You want to go in with a plan. And so then you can optimize your route, to hit things in a way that makes sense. And then also give yourself enough time to prioritize the tier 2 or tier 3 companies that you also would like to talk to if you have time. So you want to map out the fair. You don't want to be walking around aimlessly like you don't know what you're doing. You want to have your power identity. That's what I call it. It's like an elevator pitch, but it's a power identity. And it's basically who you are, and what you're looking for. Okay, and we go into the power identity in more depth in the career modules, so you can check out that video on the power identity, but essentially what you want to do is you want to say who you are and what you're looking for. So a quick example would be, hi, I'm Liz, I'm studying robotics engineering, and I'm looking for a full-time job doing whatever, robotics engineering, doing, working on systems, working on humanoid robots, working on verification and validation. I maybe wouldn't have known that that's what it was called, but you want to give them kind of a general gist of what you're looking for. This works for internships, this works for full-time, this works for senior roles. The only thing that might be weird is if you're looking for like a C-suite director role. I don't know how well that would work in this environment, because this isn't really the room for that, for like those like director level type roles. But I would say if you're a junior, like internship through like mid senior level, I think you probably could get away with doing that intro. Who you are, what you're looking for, when you're looking for it. I may put that in there. So if it's an internship, I would say something along the lines of like, hi, my name is blank. I am a junior studying software engineering, and I'm looking for a summer internship, blah, blah, blah. So that would be kind of my power identity for that. And the reason why you want to do this is because you want to make sure you're, one, talking to the right person. Talking to the right person. And two, they have what you're looking for. So I'm just going to say they have a job. Because if you say that you're looking for a summer internship and it's the spring career fair, and they've already known who their interns were from the fall career fair because they just do internships in the winter, then that person will tell you like, oh, well, we don't have anything available for summer interns And you don't have to waste 30 minutes talking to the wrong person about something that doesn't exist. You want to kind of do that quick intro, what you're looking for, when you want it, and then usually the person will respond either positively saying, wow, okay, cool, like what is your background, or tell me a little bit more about blah, blah, blah. And your goal is to obviously make sure you're talking to the right person. First of all, you want to also make sure that they have the job open. And then third, you want to keep them talking. That's my rule of thumb with in-person career fairs. The longer you can keep them talking and engaged with you, the more likely they're going to invite you in for an interview. And a lot of times with career fairs, they'll do interviews right at your school or right at the event, at the venue. They'll just have you come back later and they'll do your interview right there. So you want to keep them talking. We have a full guide on this in-person process as well in the modules. You can check out the career prep and you'll get the full template with the what to say and how to say it and all these steps in a beautiful document, not my chicken scratch handwriting. But if you're not in the boot camp, you can join us. We may have a few seats left for this month's session. You'll have to check the page, but you'll get all of that inside of the program as well. And your goal with the actual career fair is to keep them talking, and a couple stealth moves. You want to be able to give them a business card, and your resume. And it just depends on what's appropriate and what isn't appropriate. Some companies, I mean, when I was there, it wasn't fully digital, so like paper resumes were fine. I would definitely print out resumes. So I would have, 30 to 50 of them printed just in case, so you can hand them out. And then I would definitely get business cards, because sometimes it's not appropriate to hand somebody a resume, but it is appropriate to hand them a card, and they'll give you a card back. So that's a cool little hack. And then you'll be able to contact them. For some of the more modern, like startup-y, like I'll say millennial, like Gen Z types, like the recent grads that are now at the career fair promoting new jobs at their company, you might even be able to do a stealth photo. I call it a stealth photo because the way we position it for career fairs is we just say like, hey, I'm just trying to get better at remembering everybody that I'm speaking to today. I loved our conversation. Do you mind if I grab a quick photo? And then you take a photo with them, little selfie like that type deal, and then you grab a photo with them, and that serves two purposes. One, you legitimately want to remember who you're talking to, their name and their face. And then the third thing is if they're millennial, Gen Z, they're probably open to it and they think it's cool. Their company may actually be using that for like their own promotional stuff for Facebook, for Instagram, for that kind of deal. So they're probably cool with it. And the second thing is you can use that. You can send them an email and attach the photo of you together. And you can say, really enjoyed our conversation, would love to continue chatting about the senior software engineering role at XYZ startup, and continue the conversation. So the goal is to continue the convo after. So I kind of love incorporating that in because it's just kind of like a cool thing to do. And over time, you have like these photos. There's two ways to do. You can email, or you can even just do LinkedIn. And this will feed your algorithm. So if you are doing our digital strategy, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, you'll be able to post on LinkedIn, and now you'll have people that you literally talk to at a career fair. You have pictures with them, and you can talk about your experience. You can use that as content. You can use that to grow your following. You can use that to restart a conversation. It's just such a cool thing to do. And that's basically that. So you want to keep them talking. One thing I'll point out here is you want to make it project. Going back to that formula that we use for presentations in TDP. That's this. The better you are at connecting the dots and telling people exactly what you did and relate it back to what they're doing, and you tell them that you already have experience doing the thing but in this other domain, and you tell them how it's related to their domain, you're going to be getting so many cool offers on the table. And I'm speaking from my own experience because I did this. and it works super well. Like super well. The better you get at this, it works super well. And I would say arguably, this is the critical path with networking. This is the critical path. In-person networking, having good conversations, being able to speak their language and solve their problems, getting those interviews and following up, you will get invited to more interviews if that's part of their screening process, or potentially just offers. So that is what I recommend for IRL or in-person networking. Let's spend a few minutes talking about digital networking. I got to find a part on this note on this whiteboard. It's a little bit cleaner. Okay, so let's do digital. And before I do that, I'm going to get some seltzer here. Shout out Worcester, shout out Polar. Love it. Would love it if you hit the like button and subscribe if you're still watching. We're like, what, an hour and a half into this? And we're still jamming? A couple hours into this probably at this point. Let's talk about digital networking though. Digital networking, just gonna spill the tea on all of this, okay? So first things first, when you're doing digital networking, you wanna make sure your LinkedIn is optimized. Don't skip the LinkedIn Bootcamp. There's like 4 or 5 modules. Go through the LinkedIn Bootcamp, do that first, and then do networking, because it's better to network on an optimized profile than it is to network on a not optimized profile. Hopefully that makes sense. You could find those modules in career prep, and this is the strategy, okay? You're gonna use your list of those 300 companies. Again, everything's in tandem. You're going to find 5 to 10 people at all those companies. At those companies, okay? And so what this is going to look like on the micro level, and I'll just do an example. So here's company 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. At least you know I can count. About, I don't know, let's call it half of them you don't hear anything from. 2, 3, 4, 5. These guys accept your request, and now they're part of your network. Okay, the types of people that you are looking for in this, you are looking for, ideally you're looking for leadership, not super high up. You want like department leadership, so like engineering, software, like it should make sense, right? So for the example of our software engineering job, we want to look for software engineering managers, senior software engineers, engineering managers, director of engineering, director of test. I would say like leadership director. If it's a big company, you could look for associate directors. If it's a small company where it's like a recently funded stealth startup with less than 10 people, I'd be looking at like CTO potentially. Engineering managers. And I'd be looking for peers. So I'd be looking for peers. I'd be looking for who I would be reporting to, that next tier up. And then I'd be looking for a tier up from that. And I try to connect into that whole pipeline. So like on an org chart level, it might look something like this. And this is like a branch of the bigger thing. Something like that. And I would be trying to get like these people here. I would be connecting with these. And this is like the software department. Hopefully that makes sense. So you want to connect with these people. That makes sense. You try not to, obviously don't be networking with the interns if you're trying to get a senior job. Do what makes sense for where you're at. A lot of engineers are super literal, but at some point in time, you have to kind of choose, like choose your adventure. You got to do kind of like that type of work. This is what I usually recommend. Ideally, you get 5 to 10 people because like half of them are probably going to ignore you or they're not actually active on LinkedIn. And so if you can get, 50% of them to join your network, and you do this over the 300 companies, that's 1,500 connections pen is a little slow. 1,500 connections. And those 1,500 connections are very industry specific, which is why we do our research at the beginning. We analyze the job market. We figure out where we want to be. We set some intentional guardrails around what are we going after and what is our criteria. And we're going to be using that data for a lot of different reasons. We're going to be using it for our projects. We're going to be using it for when we go to career fairs, when we do our LinkedIn optimization, when we actually do some digital networking strategies. You want to make sure that your network is filled with people that are relevant to where you want to go, because this strategy requires that you post 1 to 3 times per week. And then you may say, okay, well, what do I talk about in those posts? So this is what I tell people. Industry, insights, project, updates, TDP, that's where that fits in there. And then I would be looking at, for some people, just depending on your level, tips and ideas. You don't need to go full-blown guru here, but if you have something insightful, so industry insights is more like current events. Like what I just did in this video. At the beginning, I talked about Viam's new Series C for $30 million, and I was telling you how they're kind of trying to fix that gap between AI and hardware with this new robotics technology. So that's speaking about what's happening currently in the market and being kind of sharing your opinions about where things are headed. You can do project updates, and then you can do tips, ideas, going back to that comment about I forgot the semicolon, and that was the reason why this whole thing didn't work. There's going to be those gotchas or those learnings, and those are good posts. I think I had a client where we were talking about ROS to ROS 2. There are some learnings around that as well. And so if you can provide insight to save people time, save people frustration, save people energy, and you can package it up as a quick little post that takes 30 seconds to read, people will appreciate it. And so the idea is that you're choosing topics correctly. So going back to the software engineering example for robotics, if you spent all this time talking about fabricating and manufacturing techniques on your profile to an audience of people who are software engineers, is not going to be as valuable as if you were to talk about your learnings and findings from migrating from ROS to ROS 2. And so you just need to be mindful of what you're trying to accomplish. And that's basically the process. You do this 1 to 3 times per week, stick to your 90-day plan, and you'll not only have those potentially 1,500 connections, they're all going to be very specific to what you want to do. You're going to have a very strong 1,000-person cohort of people that, as you're sharing updates and posts and projects and strategies, you're also going to be able to connect in, find jobs, find opportunities, combine this with that process of finding roles, spend 5 to 10 minutes every day searching for software engineer robotics hiring on LinkedIn, and being able to connect with hiring managers. And what is the first thing a hiring manager is going to do? They're going to go to your profile and they're going to see, whoa, this person's just been posting about everything we've been looking for the last 60 days, 30 days, 90 days, whatever. And they're going to be more inclined to talk to you about that job opportunity because it's been transparent. So that is my strategy for digital networking. I'm sure there's other ways to do it. I'm sure you could automate this too, but there's certain things that I think make sense automating, and there are certain things that I don't think make sense. I think when you're trying to build actual networking and relationships with people, and you're trying to be engaging and positioned as somebody that's a thought leader, automating that kind of defeats the purpose, right? Because you could set up an automation to automatically post to LinkedIn and scrape all of the news sites and throw that into a GPT model and then post your LinkedIn. But everyone's doing that. Everyone's doing that. You obviously could automate this. I think it would be a more valuable use of your time to automate the finding of the jobs. So we have a full training on how to do that here on the YouTube channel, and how to quickly pull that information and then just make sure that it's correct. And I would spend the actual 5 minutes to create the post. It takes 15 minutes a week. And I think that's the most valuable 15 minutes you could spend versus trying to spend, 2 to 3 hours building out an automation that does this for you automatically. And then you don't actually have any of those actual thoughts. You're not actually a thought leader. You're just using automation to pretend like you're a thought leader. I think there's a difference. But yeah, that's usually what I would recommend. Let's go back to my list. While I do that, how's it going? You're here. It's like 2.5, 3 hours now? I don't even know. So thank you so much for watching this video. Most people don't have attention spans long enough to sit through anything for more than a minute. But if you're here, that means you're not that, and you're actually looking for something legitimate. And I hope that this is valuable for you. And this is going to set kind of the stage for what to expect in Bootcamp. So you can find the details about the Bootcamp below. And if you're in the Bootcamp and you're still watching this, you're going to be going into Training 1 after this. And we're going to be leveraging a lot of this process and practice so that you have an opportunity to kind of build out your roadmap so that it makes sense. The whole point of this training is to give you holistically the view, like you're standing at a bird's eye view looking down at your future and all the different options on the table. And by setting this up, you have kind of your own roadmap. So we've done networking, digital, in real life. Let's talk a little bit about interviews and what I'm seeing right now. Let's go up here. Interviews. Okay, so what I've been seeing right now, multi-step interviews. We're seeing a Zoom. Sometimes it's phone, but it's mostly been Zoom. And then we've been seeing like these day-long. Some of them have been virtual. Most of them have been in person. When I was interviewing, it was in person. And then it's usually just like a yay or nay. That's what I've been seeing in the most consolidated version. Usually the Zoom, the phone screening is like get to know who you are, get to know the candidate, try to figure out if they have like there's kind of like two sides of it. It's like the behavioral, and then there's the actual like technical. And part of behavioral is like, can you speak, can you articulate your skills in a way that resonates with the employer or with the interviewer. So it's being able to articulate, and it's being able to relate, and obviously make good choices, and obviously not be a pain in the butt. If there was one piece of advice that I could just broadly give to the universe, it would be just be a good person. Like, show up on time, show up ahead of time, don't show up late, dress up for your interview, don't show up like you just rolled out of bed, don't be rude, like just basic tips like that like when I'm interviewing people and after a long day of talking with people on the phone, trying to figure out who we're going to hire, the last thing I want to do as the interviewer is deal with somebody that's like, doesn't want to be there, that has an attitude, that thinks they know better than me, just show up and do a good job and be a good person from a behavioral standpoint. And I'm also a huge fan of this from this angle too, from the behavioral side, is to be truthful about your work. There is nothing worse than trying to fake that you know how to do something and try to guess at how you would do it and try to come up with the answer to a problem you know you don't know the answer to. Like a good example would be, let's say you're a software engineer and they ask you a manufacturing question and you try to butcher your way through that answer. I personally believe, and this is my honest opinion, is I would just say, look, like, I've never run into, XYZ in my career. My background is in this, but should I run into it here, this is my process. This would be my approach. And then I would walk them through kind of how I would solve that problem, because I've never seen it before. And so, like, the goal isn't to lie your way into the job. The goal is to be real with people and give them real examples. And if you don't know an answer, tell them your process for how you would go about getting the answer. Because at the end of the day, they're just looking to see, like, can you handle things? Can you handle problems on your own? Can you handle the unknown on your own? Or am I going to have to pair you with somebody and they're going to have to hold your hand for this role? And sometimes that's hard to hear. So a little tough love. Being truthful. The other piece, let's tie that into hand-holding, is being independent. Meaning, can you solve problems? Do you have a methodology to solve a problem, even if you've never seen the tool before, the technology before? In the bootcamp, I give you 2 or 3 problem-solving methodologies, very similar to how we break down this video here, the only video that you need to get a 6-figure plus future tech job. We have 3 problem-solving methods that work interdisciplinary. I don't care if you're electrical, mechanical, software, systems, robotics, in aerospace, in agriculture, or in whatever, you can use this process to get yourself back on target to finding the solution. And you're going to learn those. They're in the resources section of the bootcamp. You're going to learn those and you're going to be applying them throughout this program, because my goal is to help you become more independent with your problem solving. And this was a hard truth that I had to learn when I was starting my career, is that just about nothing from my academics translated over to the environment that I was working in. And so it was a battle of every single day, not really knowing exactly what I needed to do and having to use TDP before it was called TDP. I was doing TDP before I had a name for it, doing that process and using my problem-solving methodology to figure things out without calling my boss every 2 seconds. Because there's nothing worse than hiring somebody that can't handle things on their own. So learning how to be kind of that independent thought leader, that independent problem solver, this right here, man, will serve you so well. It served me so well in my career. It allowed me to accelerate super fast, purely because I wasn't being annoying and asking my boss 17 million questions every single day on what to do and how to do it. I had a method. And that method I'm going to teach you. It's in the resources. You can check it out after this video. That would be kind of my thoughts on the behavioral side of interviews. On the technical side of interviews, goes back to TDP. So we've already gone through the presentation style about the context, doing the demo, defining the problem, telling your process, coming up with the solution, giving, a code review or a whiteboard demo or a drawing review or whatever. The solution, and then the outcome or the impact that has. When you're talking tech, you're going to do the exact same thing. But the one thing that I will tell you in these technical interviews is you need to make sure you understand the question. When I do mock interviews with our mentorship clients, I'll ask them a technical question and they'll just start giving me the answer. And the crazy part is they don't have enough information to answer the question. But they somehow have the answer, which is really suspicious. So when you're in these technical interviews, the biggest thing that you can do is make sure that you, 1, understand the question, and 2, you have all the context. Just like you give context when you're demoing, you're telling people about the environment, the assumptions, the requirements, this is what we're here to do. You have all of the info to actually provide a relevant answer. So you need to make sure that you have all of this, because I see this happen so many times in technical interviews where the interviewer will ask a question and then the person will just go on a tangent answering something that has nothing to do with the actual question because they didn't clarify. So clarify what they're talking about. And there's nothing wrong with doing this in an interview, because if they push back on you and they don't want to give you any information, then that is okay. You can just say, well, I just want to make sure I'm solving the right problem, or I'm answering the right question. I just want to make sure I understand what problem we have before I go solving a problem that I don't even know if it's a real problem. Because that's something in engineering school that they don't really make obvious, is problems aren't equal. So I'm going to give you kind of an example from a client of mine in mentorship, where he was in an interview and they stumped him on this. They asked him a question about, I want to say it was like security cameras or something. And this was for a robotics role at a company. And he was responsible for deploying robotics equipment and machinery and that kind of stuff. And so the interviewer asked him something along the lines of, somebody comes up to you in the factory and they tell you that a security camera is down and we have to have security cameras running. So what would you do? What would you do in that scenario? And his response was solving for the security cameras. And my first question when we were reviewing that interview, because we do a debrief on all of our interviews in mentorship, is, are you the right person to be worrying about the security cameras? And so when I first asked that question to him, and shout out if you're watching, appreciate you, you're doing a great job, and this is okay, this is a learning experience, is the minute I asked him, I'm like, are you responsible for security cameras in your role as a robotics engineer? And the answer is no. And so that would have been the first qualifying or clarifying question I would have been asking the interviewer. I would have said, curious, do we have a facilities person, facilities manager, a security team? I know a lot of these bigger corporations, and this was for a bigger corporation. This was not for Joe's engineering company up the road where there's 3 people that work there. This was for a company that has hundreds of thousands of global employees. And so then my first question would be, am I the right person to solve this problem? Is this my problem? And if it is my problem, how am I going to solve it? Do I have all the information that I need? Or is this a problem that somebody else should be solving because they're better suited to solve it? And that was one of the gotcha questions in this technical interview, was if you remove this, if you move over and you start solving the security problem, the security camera problem, and you're responsible for a factory where there are robots producing products or moving products as part of a process, and you aren't there at that work cell and your robot goes down, you're going to be costing the company a ton of money by solving a security camera problem that should be going to facilities or the third-party securities partner to solve. And so I always caution engineers to make sure that you understand that problems aren't equal. So is it your problem? And I'm not saying you can't be helpful. So in the scenario of like you're given a problem that isn't really your problem, it's like beyond the scope of what you would be the right fit for, then the solution is you need to find the right person. That is the solution, because they're better equipped to solve that problem. And if you leave your work cell on a high volume production and something happens to your line, the company's going to lose a lot of money. And the interviewer, if you explain that to them like that, they'll probably agree with you. And they'll probably say, good call. So problems aren't equal. Is it yours? And is it an actual problem? So in the situation of the security cameras, my question would be like, okay, well, which camera is it? If it was my responsibility, I'd be wondering, okay, well, where's the camera? Is it, pointing at a corner in the wall somewhere, that nobody walks by in the universe. Like, okay, cool. We have a problem with that, but it's not, my priority right this second. It'll be something that we get to. So then the question becomes, if it is my problem, is it a real problem or is it like a fake problem? Like there are, especially in corporate, there are lots of opportunities where people will make problems out of things that are not problems. And so we want to just be making sure we have full clarity on the question. And we want to make sure we have enough information and enough context to be answering the questions properly. And if you can do that in an interview and you can define that, it will serve you well. It served me well. It served my clients well. And then just use TDP, for example. So as they bring up like, do you have experience doing XYZ? Well, that's where TDP comes into play because you're going to be using a lot of the projects from this program to be able to give yourself credibility, right? So if they're asking you about tell me your thoughts about integrating, software and hardware together for a mobile robot platform. Like, what are some considerations that you have? If you've never worked on a mobile robot platform, it's going to be really hard for you to answer that question, even if you have 17 degrees or a bunch of certs or a bunch of courses that you've taken. But if you've done a project working with a mobile robot, this is why you do your research and why you look at what the market is looking for first, and you build projects around what the market wants so that when you're going into these conversations, you're likely to have something that's relevant. Then you can speak to that experience and start tying back into what you did. What was the problem that you were solving? What was your process? How did you go about doing that? You can basically rinse and repeat my problem solving methodologies, and you can talk about how you go about identifying what the actual problem is, clarifying it, making sure you're solving for the right thing. There's nothing worse than wasting time solving a problem that either doesn't exist or it's the wrong problem or it's not your problem and you're not the best person suited for handling that. So yeah, that's what I have for interviewing. And other than like the etiquette and like dressing nicely and, being a good person, being truthful, those are basically the basics of what I would recommend. So we'll check that off. Offers and negotiations. We're almost done here. We're in the final stretch. Get myself a little more of this seltzer. If you're liking this, hit the like button. I've never done a video this long on YouTube, and I'm hoping you guys like it. Pouring my heart and soul in this as I'm trying to find a clean spot on this whiteboard. I didn't mention whiteboard demos, but if you are in person for an interview and they have a whiteboard in the room, I love selling myself. Like if you're in an interview, you're basically in a sales call. You're trying to sell them on why they should pick you. And if you have access to a whiteboard and you're doing anything technical, or you bring a notebook with you and or an iPad or something to draw on, if you can draw stuff out and you can prototype stuff out using whiteboard or using pen and paper, and you can articulate to that drawing, like literally what I am doing right now, it's very compelling. It's a very compelling skill. I've received a lot of job offers from whiteboard interviews where they don't ask me to get to the whiteboard. I find myself up at the whiteboard and I find myself presenting ideas to them, drawing on a whiteboard. And it can be a really quick way to show somebody you know what you're talking about. Presuming you know how to draw on a whiteboard and you're not just like doodling. All right, let's talk about offers and negotiation. Okay, so a couple things that I like to do, and this is more so for folks in mentorship. If you're interested in mentorship and you're in the boot camp, we'll let you know around like week 10 or so if we think you're a good fit for it, just because you do need to have an engineering background for it really to make sense. You need to have a strong background in tech. And so if you're interested in that, week 10 is when we send out notices to people in boot camp. If you are watching on YouTube and you already have a strong engineering background and you just need a way to go through this process without the BS, then mentorship could be a fit. You can just check out the link in the description below and you can apply in. It is by application only because you need to do a technical demo. And yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that. But this is the process that I take when we get offers in. So usually what I'm doing is we're looking at let me just put base salary. We are looking at basically market-based wages all over again. But we're doing it in the context of this role. So we're looking at the base salary, we're looking at the city, we are looking at the role, like the level. We are looking at the responsibilities. And we're basically just taking a look at the context of the offer, right? People get so emotional about money, and that is why I think if you can start with what you want and the lifestyle and how much money you actually need and what your goals are and where you're living and all of that, and you do that ahead of time, by the time you get the offer on the table, you're not as emotional about it because you've already done your research. Like, you already know. It's just like if you were to buy a home in a neighborhood and you never went on Zillow and you never checked neighborhood pricing, like what did houses, you never checked comps in the neighborhood, and you just like went in and you try to buy a house. Like, you have no point of reference. And that's why I love my process, because it just makes a lot of sense. And so at this stage in the game, you should already know what your numbers are, and you obviously should be applying to roles that you would say yes to. Sometimes they won't tell you what the amount is, but you can figure that out from salary.com. And I like salary.com because it's pretty middle of the road. And then pay scale. Pay scale is usually lower. I don't know what percentage, maybe 5 to 10% lower. Maybe. It just seems to be low. Now, if you go to like the Glassdoors, the Levels, any of those self-reported websites, just know that everybody lies about their salary and they'll tell you they make 20 to 30% more. So just take a 20 to 30% haircut, and that's probably what people are actually getting paid. And again, we're looking at base. We're not looking at total comp. Total comp, there's a number of ways you can slice total comp. And so I always try to look at base because that's the easiest metric to just kind of gauge on. And then you're looking at things as add-ons on the top of that. So this is what I'm looking at. I'm looking at base. I am looking at benefits. So benefits, let me just break this down a little bit more. So benefits could be like insurance. And if this is like obvious to you, that's fine. But some people, they don't even know this. Like, there's so many engineers that I work with that they've never like really understood how any of this works, because I get it. They don't teach you this. You don't know this until you get your first paycheck, what any of this really looks like, unless somebody's explained it to you. Or you have somebody that you know that's in the industry, whether that's a family member or a sibling, and they've explained it to you. So I'm just going to explain it here because this is the only video that you need to get a 6-figure career in future tech. So let's talk about it. Benefits, insurance, this could be vacation, time. This could be startups. They'll do like lunches, or they'll do like gym membership. Gym memberships. What else? There could be any number of things. We'll do like retirement. A lot of companies, they'll do like 401k and they'll do a match. I've seen it like as high as like 6%, maybe even higher at some companies. I've been seeing like 6% recently, which is kind of cool. Sometimes they'll cover your premium, sometimes they won't, depending on the insurance provider, so that's something to look into. And then you've got kind of added, what I'll call like added money, which is like bonuses. And bonuses don't usually come into play with engineering. I haven't really seen it unless you're on the product side or you're on the sales side, because there's like, what are you going to get a bonus on? There's nothing to tie that extra money to from a performance standpoint. So bonuses usually come in on the maybe more non-technical or like the applications. Like if you're a application engineer and you actually report through sales, you might see a bonus structure. For hitting so many customers monthly, quarterly, annually, whatever. And then you'll see equity. If you're in a startup, you'll probably see some equity. And then I usually look at vesting. I'm going to put commissions up here with bonuses because, again, that's more of a sales function. If you are non-technical and you want the fastest way into like future tech, try getting a sales job. If you have sales experience, obviously, account management, sales, enterprise sales, that applications engineering. If you have an engineering background but you want to start shifting towards business and sales, I'd be looking at application engineering that reports up to the sales arm, because you might be eligible for bonuses or commissions based on performance, which is kind of nice. Equity, the vesting period you want to look at. And if you have any restrictions, meaning if you leave after a certain amount of time, do they call it back? So you just want to understand that. I've seen things like 4 years. That's what I've seen. It vests over 4 years and it is restricted for the first X months. That's what I've seen in some of these offers. Granted, it's going to be specific to your scenario, but this is just kind of me speaking out loud on what I've seen. And then other added money that maybe people don't talk about, relocation. Depending on where you're moving and who you're moving from, if you're moving through corporate, they usually cover your move. Sometimes they'll even help you sell your house if it's a big move. So like when I was moving around for corporate, we did have relocation options. They'll either do a full done for you and they just take care of it, or you can get the cash comp and they'll tell you like the dollar amount. And if you know your numbers right, the cash comp sometimes is a better deal. Like, for example, they'll either say like, we'll do it all for you. All you need to do is just tell us when to show up and we'll have our movers come, we'll pay for it, we'll move you. And you don't handle any of the logistics. You don't handle any of the payments. It just goes through corporate's relocation service. Or sometimes they'll say, you have a choice. We can do it all for you, and you just tell us when and where, and we'll be there to pick everything up. Or we'll give you $10,000, and you can do it yourself. Whatever. This number is a made-up number. It's like a number I've seen on some offers, so it might be more or less than this depending on the role, depending on where you're moving to, like the level that you're at, like a director level with, where they expect you to have, a whole house full of stuff and a family and cars and that kind of stuff. Obviously it's probably going to be more than that, but I'm just generalizing. Like they'll tell you like, we'll either take care of it for you, or here's a relocation cash comp package and you can pick this. And you're going to be responsible for figuring your move out. We're just going to pay you basically a lump sum. I don't know why. There we go. Lump sum. And so that's basically relocation. And what I tell people is you need to do your numbers. You need to figure out where you're moving and what you want to figure out what the better deal is for you. And if you're not like a logistics person and you don't want to be dealing with movers and you don't want to be coordinating stuff, then sometimes having the company just move you is the easier path of resistance. Then just go do that. Or if you're the kind of person that's like, well, I could move myself for $2,000 and they're going to give me 10, I want to pocket the 8, you can play that game. I'm just telling you what the game is and the availability of that. The other bonus I didn't really mention, now that I'm thinking about it, is sign-on. This happens in startups. I've seen it more in startups. I don't know how many startups are doing it today, but I've seen it. word to the wise on sign-on bonuses, negotiate this before you move. Do not let them bundle this in with your first paycheck. And I'll tell you why in a minute. So you want to make sure that you get your sign. If you're able to negotiate, which you should be negotiating, you should be standing up for yourself. Negotiate this before you move. Do not let them bundle it into your first paycheck, which will be like 2 to 3 weeks after you start, before you move. And the same with this. If you do the cash comp on the relo, get it before you move. And I'm going to tell you a little story of mine. And this worked out, luckily, to my benefit, but it was not a fun situation. So early in my career, I got a job at a startup, and I had a sign-on bonus, and I had a relocation package, and I was moving from Florida to Boston, and I negotiated as part of that deal that they would pay those two things to me before I move. And my argument was, if I'm going to be moving that far of a distance, that I needed to be able to pay the movers. I need to be able to coordinate this. I need the cash to be able to do it. And that way I can make sure that I'm there and I'm ready to go. And so I negotiated that sign-on bonus, and I negotiated that relo before I was even on their payroll. So they pay that to me before I even started working, because it's a sign-on bonus. I signed, so I expect to get paid this now. I'm relocating. The movers expect to get paid before they move me, right? So I'm going to need to be able to pay them so that I can move. So I got that amount of money. And I'm so thankful that I did that, because when I worked at this startup, I ended up getting laid off, not even 90 days into that job. And that was a tough period in my life. And so speaking from that experience, in the state and working in the state of Massachusetts, I had a lot of things to my favor, because in the state of Massachusetts, they don't issue unemployment unless you've been paid a certain amount of money. And I forget the equation, but it's like a second or third way of calculating unemployment benefits. And so when I was laid off, it was a little bit upsetting, a lot upsetting. I bet I still have that video of being upset about it. But anywho, it was unexpected. And I also didn't have a replacement job, so I didn't have an income. And so when you work for a startup, you get used to getting paid a significant amount of money that's more than, let's say, a regular engineering job. When you work at a startup, a lot of times you get a lot of benefits. You get a bigger salary. You're working in a more expensive city. And so I had all of that stacked up against me, unfortunately, and I was laid off. And because I had negotiated the sign-on bonus and the relo before I made the move, and I had a handful of paychecks that had gone through the company, I was then eligible for unemployment benefits. Now, was it enough to fully replace my income? No. But if I could give one piece of advice to anybody that's moving for a new opportunity with a startup, the one piece of advice would be, you need to make sure that you get paid ahead of time for things that are happening before the job. So if they tell you it's a sign-on bonus, you should be getting paid when you sign. Don't wait. Don't let them push it back, because they'll try to negotiate pushing that money back, because they probably know that if for whatever reason they lay you off, you'll be exempt from getting paid unemployment because you haven't met the threshold for the state. There's a video on my Instagram that talks about kind of the math that I didn't do before accepting that offer. And so there were a few things at stake, but biggest piece of advice is just negotiate anything up front that makes sense that you need to be getting paid up front, because that can save you towards the end. If something, it's almost like an insurance policy for yourself. So in case, instead of getting through that entire moving to that new place and then being told, sorry, we don't need you anymore, and then you're stuck and you're on the hook for a new lease, a new house, a new mortgage, a new whatever, and you've just moved thousands of miles away, at least you'll be eligible for potentially some support to help you get kind of that next role. So that is my biggest piece of advice there. And what else? Equity vesting period. something that could be helpful if you're reviewing these offers and you have kind of these complex plans is to talk with somebody financial, like if you can find a financial advisor or somebody that you trust with giving you good advice around equity investing periods, then I would have that conversation to make sure it actually makes sense for where you're at, because it sounds good, like you're making X amount of dollars or you have X amount of shares from an equity standpoint, but it's hard to conceptualize what that actual equity or those shares mean until there's an event. And so just having those conversations with somebody that's well versed in startup vesting jargon could be useful as well when you're negotiating. I'm trying to think if there's anything else from a base and benefit standpoint. I think that's pretty standard. Really the two key takeaways will be the relocation, and any sign-on bonuses is making sure that you get your cash comp ahead of time and don't sit on that. And just reviewing this, making sure that it is market-based. So the best part about offers, and if you go through that 300 plan, ideally you're having 4 to 10 offers on the table in that time frame, so you're going to have something else to look at to just kind of get a feel, like, is this a good deal or is this a bad deal? And a good deal and a bad deal doesn't mean like the amount of money you personally want to make. Like going back to market-based wages, and the analogy that I always use with people to really hit it home is, if you decided you wanted to become a world-class heart surgeon, you go to school, you get the credentials, and you're a heart surgeon, and then one day you wake up and you decide you want to become a cashier at a grocery store, the grocery store isn't going to pay you your heart surgeon salary. Why? Market-based wages. You're not doing the thing that is valuable to be at that heart surgeon salary level, being a cashier at a grocery store. And so just because you want to make a certain amount of money doesn't mean the role that you're looking at can support it. And so that's why it's really important to understand this. And then I'd be using those tools, salary.com and PayScale, to just get a look to see, is this reasonable for what they're asking me to do? And only you are going to know if it's reasonable or not. But don't be greedy about it. Like, I have people coming into the program and they have no experience, no background, no skills, and they tell me in 90 days they want to be making $300K. And it's like, well, wait a minute. If it was that easy, if it was really that easy, everybody would be doing it. And unfortunately, I think a lot of that comes from just random people on the internet trying to boast how much money they're making. But I always go back to market-based wages. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And I like to keep things real. You can look up, the average robotics engineer. I believe we got that from salary.com. The average robotics engineer makes $62 an hour. And that's how we price our programs. That's how we price our bootcamp, to make it reasonable that you're going to make your money back in less than a year, less than a few months, depending on what you're doing. So it's not designed to be, a ridiculous investment. It's designed to be appropriate, again, based on the market, based on the roles, based on the responsibilities of getting to that next step in your career. So I think that's all we got for negotiation and offers. And now we're at our last one, your next steps. So at this point in the video, I want to thank you for taking your time out of your busy day to watch this extremely long, only video you need to make a 6-figure salary working in future tech, robotics, automation, AI. I hope you've had a lot of fun. I hope you've learned a lot. If you're in the boot camp, your next step is to move into training 1, and you start practicing and building out your first projects and reviewing some technical concepts, and then going through trainings 2 through 5 and beyond. You're good to go, and you know what you're aiming for. That will be your next step. If you're watching this on YouTube and you want to join us in the boot camp, it is a full 12-week experience. We dive into all of these topics in greater detail with all the videos, the templates, the tools, the trackers, the systems, the schedule. It's a lot of work to do in 12 weeks by yourself. You 100% can do it. Take this video, use this, and try to do it yourself. We have a lot of people that attempt to do this and they're just like, this is way too much stuff and my head is exploding. I would much rather just go through the process and have all the tools and resources to be successful over 12 weeks. So if that's you, check out the link in the description below. Have a great day. Bye.